Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Pillars of Sand. Leo Harmon stood at the window of his study, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and red. At 52, he had built a life many would envy. A successful construction company specializing in luxury developments, a sprawling estate in Seattle's affluent Medina neighborhood, and what he had once believed was a loving family. The warm glow of achievement, however, had begun to cool in recent years. His phone buzzed. A message from his daughter Bella. "Dad, getting super excited about tomorrow. Can't believe your little girl is getting married." Leo smiled. Despite the growing distance between him and his wife Gloria over the past 2 years, his children had remained his anchors. Bella, 24 and headstrong like him, had always been Daddy's little girl. Their son, Flynn, 22, was more reserved and had gravitated toward his mother's artistic sensibilities rather than Leo's pragmatic business mind. He typed back, "Wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart. Proudest day of my life." Setting down his phone, Leo poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and sank into his leather chair. The house felt unusually quiet. Gloria had mentioned something about final wedding preparations with her sister, Renee. Leo had offered to help, but was told everything was under control. That seemed to be the pattern lately. His offers of involvement politely declined, his presence increasingly peripheral. The distance had begun shortly after Flynn left for college. Without the children as buffers, Leo and Gloria had discovered an uncomfortable truth. They had little left to say to each other. The silences grew longer, the separate activities more frequent. Leo had thrown himself into expanding Harmon Construction, working longer hours, securing bigger contracts. Gloria had rekindled her passion for interior design, collaborating with an old friend from art school, Adam Kendall. Leo took a long sip of whiskey, the liquid warming his throat. Adam. Something about the man unsettled him, but he couldn't quite place it. They'd met at several dinner parties Gloria had insisted on hosting over the past year. Adam was divorced, charismatic, and seemed to make Gloria laugh in ways Leo hadn't managed in years. But Leo wasn't the jealous type, or so he told himself. His computer pinged with a notification. His head of operations, Barrett Leary, had sent the final contracts for the Riverside Heights project, a $40 million development that would cement Harmon Construction's reputation as the premier luxury builder in the Pacific Northwest. Barrett had been with Leo since the beginning, 25 years ago, when they were just 2 ambitious young men with tool belts and dreams. Now they employed over 200 people. Barrett was more than a colleague. He was family in ways that sometimes felt more reliable than blood. Leo's phone rang again. It was his mother, Wanda. "Leo, darling." Her voice crackled through the speaker. "Just checking you remembered to pick up your suit from the tailor's. You know how you get when you're in the middle of a big project." "Got it yesterday, Mom," Leo assured her. "Everything's ready for tomorrow." Good. Your father and I are so proud. First grandchild getting married. Who would have thought little Bella would beat us all to the altar?" Leo chuckled. "She knows what she wants. Always has." Like her father, Wanda said warmly, "We'll see you tomorrow then. Love you, son." "Love you too, Mom." As Leo hung up, he felt a momentary pang of unease. Something wasn't right. The house was too quiet, the preparations too smooth, his involvement too minimal. But he brushed it aside. Tomorrow was Bella's day, and nothing would spoil it. He didn't notice the calendar notification on his computer, moved from its original date to a week earlier. He didn't see the empty guest room where his parents should have been staying. And he certainly didn't hear Gloria's hushed phone conversation from the garden patio, her laughter floating on the evening air as she whispered, "It's all taken care of." He doesn't suspect a thing. Chapter 2, Shadows and Whispers. Morning arrived with an unusual stillness. Leo woke early, as was his habit, reaching across the king-size bed to find Gloria's side empty and cold. He checked his watch, 6:15 a.m. Unusual for her to be up before him, especially on such an important day. The smell of coffee drifted up from the kitchen. Leo pulled on his robe and headed downstairs, expecting to find his wife in her typical pre-event flurry. Instead, the kitchen was empty, the coffee pot set on automatic timer. A note sat on the marble island. Had to check on flowers. See you at the venue. Gee, Leo frowned. The ceremony wasn't until 4 p.m., and Gloria had assured him the florist had everything under control. He poured himself coffee, the unease from last night returning like a low-grade fever. His phone buzzed with a text from Barrett. Big day, boss. Want me to pick you up at 2? Sounds good, Leo replied. Thanks for having my back as always. He spent the morning reviewing the Riverside Heights contracts, making notes for Barrett about material suppliers and timelines. Work had always been his refuge, the place where things made sense, where effort yielded predictable results. Unlike family, unlike marriage. Around noon, Leo tried calling Gloria. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried Bella next, with the same result. Even Flynn's phone rang unanswered. Leo told himself not to worry. Wedding days were chaotic. Signals could be poor at the venue, a converted barn in wine country an hour outside Seattle. He dressed in his tailored suit, a deep charcoal gray that Gloria had once said brought out the silver in his still thick black hair. As he adjusted his tie, Leo caught himself in the mirror. The lines around his eyes had deepened in recent years, but he remained fit and imposing at 6'2". His grandfather had been Italian, giving him an olive complexion that didn't betray his age as quickly as some of his peers. The doorbell rang at precisely 2 p.m. Barrett stood on the doorstep, his own suit a shade lighter than Leo's, his expression uncharacteristically somber. Everything okay? Leo asked, immediately sensing something amiss. Barrett hesitated. Let's talk in the car. Once inside Barrett's Mercedes, the tension became palpable. Barrett gripped the steering wheel without starting the engine. What's going on? Leo demanded. Barrett took a deep breath. I wasn't going to say anything. Thought it wasn't my place. But you've been more than a boss to me, Leo. You're my brother in everything but blood. Just spit it out, Leo said, his voice tightening. I saw Gloria yesterday, with Adam Kendall. They were at the Fairmont, having lunch. But it looked intimate, very intimate. Leo felt his jaw clench. You sure about this? Barrett nodded grimly. There's more. They were looking at property listings. I overheard enough to know they were talking about places in California. Gloria mentioned something about after everything is finalized. The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. The distance, the separate activities, the hushed phone calls. Leo had built his company on attention to detail, yet had missed the signs of his own marriage crumbling. Take me to the venue, Leo said, his voice deceptively calm. Now, the drive was silent, Leo's mind racing through calculations and possibilities. He'd built his life methodically, brick by brick. He would not watch it demolished without understanding why, and by whom. When they arrived at the rustic venue, Whispering Pines Ranch, something seemed off immediately. The parking lot was nearly empty, with only a few maintenance vehicles present. No florist vans, no caterers, no wedding guests. Leo strode toward the main building, a renovated barn with soaring ceilings and exposed beams. The doors were unlocked, but the space was empty. No chairs, no altar, no decorations. Nothing to suggest a wedding was happening in mere hours. A groundskeeper was sweeping the polished concrete floors. Excuse me, Leo called. Where is everyone? The Harmon Crawford wedding is today at 4. The man looked confused. Harmon Crawford? That was last weekend, sir. Beautiful ceremony. Leo felt as if the ground had suddenly vanished beneath his feet. That's impossible. My daughter is getting married today. I'm her father. The groundskeeper's expression shifted from confusion to discomfort. I'm sorry, sir. I worked that wedding myself. It was definitely last Saturday. Leo's phone was in his hand before he consciously reached for it. He pulled up Bella's message from yesterday. Dad, getting super excited about tomorrow. The date stamp. He checked the date stamp. The message was from a week ago Friday. With robotic movements, Leo opened his photo gallery. There are no recent pictures of Bella in a wedding dress, no family photos from a rehearsal dinner. His finger hovered over his Instagram app, which he rarely used except to post major family events. Barrett placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Leo, maybe we should. But Leo was already opening the app, already searching for Bella's profile, already scrolling through the flood of images posted 6 days ago. His daughter in a white dress, radiant and beautiful. Gloria in mother of the bride blue, tearing up. Flynn giving a toast, glass raised. Leo's parents flanking the bride, beaming with pride. The entire wedding party, laughing under string lights as dusk settled. And not a single photo with Leo in it. Not one. His phone rang, startling him out of his stunned trance. Gloria's name flashed on the screen. "Where are you?" he answered, his voice unnaturally controlled. "Leo, darling," Gloria sounded surprised. "I'm at home. Where are you?" "I'm at Whispering Pines. For our daughter's wedding." A long pause. Then, "Oh, Leo, you need to come home. We need to talk. About the wedding I wasn't invited to, or about you and Adam house hunting in California." Another silence. "Come home, Leo. Please." As Barrett drove him back to Medina, Leo sat in perfect stillness, like a statue hewn from ice. His mind, normally filled with plans and calculations, had gone terrifyingly quiet. One thought emerged from the silence, crystalline in its clarity. Someone would pay for this. Everyone would pay for this. He just needed time to ensure they paid in full. Chapter 3. Ashes in the Mouth. Leo entered his home with the careful precision of a man crossing a minefield. The grand foyer, with its sweeping staircase and crystal chandelier, suddenly seemed like a movie set, beautiful but hollow, lacking substance beneath the polished surface. Gloria waited in the living room, perched on the edge of the cream-colored sofa they'd purchased on their 15th anniversary. Next to her sat Flynn, looking uncomfortable in pressed chinos and a blue button-down. Across from them, in matching armchairs, were Leo's parents, Walter and Wanda Harmon, their expressions a mixture of guilt and apprehension. No sign of Bella. Or Adam Kendall. "Where's our daughter?" Leo asked, his voice level. Gloria's eyes were red-rimmed, but Leo couldn't tell if it was from tears or lack of sleep. "She and Curtis left for their honeymoon in Bali yesterday. 10 days. Curtis Crawford." The name registered dimly in Leo's mind. Bella's boyfriend of 3 years, a software engineer at some tech company. Seemed like a decent young man the few times they'd met. Now he was Leo's son-in-law, and Leo hadn't even been present to shake his hand at the altar. "Sit down, son," Walter said, gesturing to the empty space beside Gloria. Leo remained standing. "I think I'll stay on my feet for this particular family meeting." Gloria twisted her wedding ring, a 3-carat diamond set in platinum that Leo had upgraded on their 20th anniversary. "We need to explain." "Yes," Leo agreed coldly. "You do." Flynn cleared his throat. "Dad, this isn't easy for any of us." "Quiet," Leo cut him off. "You haven't earned the right to speak yet." Wanda winced. "Leo, please. We're still family." "Are we?" Leo looked around at the faces he'd loved and trusted. Because family doesn't erase someone from a milestone like their daughter's wedding. Family doesn't lie and manipulate. So please enlighten me. What exactly are we? Gloria stood, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her linen pants. The wedding date was moved up because Curtis got a major promotion that requires relocation to Singapore. It was very sudden. We tried to reach you, but you were in Portland for that big contract signing. You weren't answering calls. Leo laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. I was in Portland for exactly 6 hours. The rest of the time, I was right here, working from home, completely reachable. Try again. Flynn looked at his shoes. Walter studied his hands. Wanda dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The truth, Gloria, Leo demanded. For once. Gloria's composure cracked slightly. The truth is that Bella didn't want you there. None of us did. The words landed like body blows, but Leo didn't flinch. Go on. You haven't really been present in this family for years, Leo, Gloria continued, gaining momentum. You're physically here, but mentally? You're always at work, always calculating, always planning the next project. Do you know that you missed Flynn's college graduation dinner because you were on the phone with a supplier? That you forgot my 50th birthday entirely? that you've never once asked Bella what she wanted for her future, only assumed she'd be happy with what you wanted for her. So this was what a punishment, Leo asked quietly. It was a decision to have one perfect day without walking on eggshells around your mood, your schedule, your priorities, Gloria replied. One day where we could just be happy without wondering if you'd actually be mentally present or just checking your phone every 5 minutes. Leo turned to Flynn. And you agree with this? Flynn finally looked up, a mixture of defiance and shame in his eyes. You don't even know what I'm studying in my master's program, Dad. You still think I'm doing business administration. I switched to art history a year ago. And you too. Leo addressed his parents. What's your excuse? Walter sighed heavily. We love you, son, but we've watched you become someone we don't recognize. Someone cold. Someone who measures everything in dollars and cents, even relationships. So you all conspired to teach me a lesson, Leo concluded. It wasn't like that, Wanda protested. No. Leo arched an eyebrow. Then why the elaborate deception? The fake text messages? The calendar manipulation? Why not just tell me to my face that I wasn't wanted at my own daughter's wedding? Silence fell over the room. Outside, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Seattle skyline sparkled in the distance. The Space Needle illuminated against the darkening sky. There's one more thing, Gloria said finally. I want a divorce. Leo nodded, as if he'd been expecting this. Of course you do. And I'm guessing Adam Kendall has been very supportive during this difficult decision. Gloria flushed. Adam has nothing to do with this. Please don't insult what little remains of our relationship by lying about the obvious, Leo said wearily. Barrett saw you house hunting in California with him. It's not what you think, Gloria began. It never is, Leo cut her off. Here's what's going to happen now. I'm going to go upstairs, pack some essentials, and check into a hotel. You have 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live. The divorce attorneys can sort out the rest. This is my home too, Gloria protested. The deed is in my name alone, Leo reminded her. As is your car, your credit cards, and the vacation property in Maui. I suggest you use the 2 weeks wisely. Flynn stood up. Dad, you can't just. I can and I will, Leo stated with finality. You all made a choice. Now you get to live with the consequences. As Leo turned to leave, Walter called after him. Son, we can work this out. As a family. Leo paused at the threshold. We're not a family anymore. We're just people who used to know each other. Upstairs in the master bedroom, Leo methodically packed a suitcase with enough clothes for a week. His movements were precise, his breathing controlled. Only when he entered Bella's old room, now a guest room that still held traces of her childhood. Gymnastics trophies, framed photos of father and daughter fishing trips, a stuffed bear he'd won for her at a carnival when she was 7. Did his composure slip? He picked up a photo from her nightstand. It showed Leo teaching a 10-year-old Bella how to use a power drill, both wearing matching safety goggles, both laughing. He slipped the picture into his suitcase. By the time Leo descended the stairs, the living room was empty. He could hear muffled voices from the kitchen. His family, already moving on with their lives, already adapting to his absence. It had been so easy for them to erase him once. They had no idea how permanent that erasure would become. Leo texted Barrett, "Need a favor. Can you meet me at the Olympic?" The response came immediately, "On my way." "You okay?" Leo didn't answer. He wasn't okay. He might never be okay again, but he would be something else, something his family had never seen coming. As he walked out the front door of the home he'd built with his own hands, Leo didn't look back. The Leo Harmon who had entered that house was gone, incinerated in the flames of betrayal. From those ashes, something new and terrible was emerging, something with only one purpose. Retribution. Chapter 4. Blueprints of Revenge. The Olympic Hotel's penthouse suite offered an unobstructed view of Elliott Bay, the water a slate gray under the cloudy morning sky. Leo stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, watching a ferry make its slow journey toward Bainbridge Island. He'd slept remarkably well for a man whose life had imploded, a dreamless, deep slumber that had left him clear-headed and focused. Barrett arrived with breakfast and coffee, placing the paper bag on the suite's dining table. Thought you might not feel like going down to the restaurant. Leo turned from the window, thoughtful as always. Thank you. They sat across from each other, steam rising from paper cups of strong black coffee. Barrett studied his friend and employer carefully. You're calmer than I expected. Anger clouds judgment, Leo replied, taking a deliberate bite of his breakfast sandwich. And I need absolute clarity for what comes next. Barrett nodded slowly. Which is? First, information. I need to understand exactly what happened, who knew what, and when. Then, containment, securing my assets and limiting the damage to the company. Finally, response. You mean revenge, Barrett clarified. Leo's expression remained impassive. I mean justice. They chose to excise me from their lives. I'm simply going to honor that choice, completely and irrevocably. Barrett had known Leo long enough to recognize the steel beneath the calm exterior. What do you need from me? I need you to be my eyes and ears. Gloria will be leaving the house within 2 weeks. I want to know where she goes, who she contacts. Same for Flynn. My parents will probably return to their condo in Florida, but keep tabs on their communications with Gloria, if possible. And Bella. A flicker of something, pain, perhaps, crossed Leo's face before disappearing. Let her have her honeymoon. When she returns, she'll find her world dramatically changed. For now, focus on Gloria and Flynn. Barrett hesitated. Leo, about the renovations. Leo's attention sharpened. What renovations? The Medina house. Gloria mentioned to me last month that you'd approved major renovations while Bella was on her honeymoon. Something about surprising her when she returned. The contractors are scheduled to start next week. Leo set down his coffee. I approved no such thing. Barrett winced. That's what I thought. The price tag is significant, close to $1 million. Gloria said you'd already arranged financing through the company. A cold smile spread across Leo's face. Did she now? How convenient that I supposedly approved this massive expenditure right before she asked for a divorce. Want me to cancel the contractors? Leo considered this for a moment. No. Let's see what happens when the bills come due and the money isn't there. I'm curious about how she planned to handle that particular detail. Leo spent the morning on his laptop, methodically reviewing financial records, property deeds, and company accounts. By noon, he had transferred significant assets to newly created holdings, changed passwords on joint accounts, and contacted his attorney to begin divorce proceedings. His phone buzzed with a text from Flynn. Dad, can we talk? Just us? Leo ignored it. Another text followed. I'm sorry about everything. I wanted to tell you. Again, Leo didn't respond. Then his phone rang. Gloria. The credit cards aren't working, she said without preamble when he answered. How unfortunate, Leo replied mildly. Leo, this is childish. I have expenses. Not my concern anymore, he cut her off. You have 2 weeks to vacate the house. I suggest you focus on that rather than shopping. The renovations are scheduled to begin on Monday, Gloria said, her voice tight. The contractors need the deposit by tomorrow. Leo allowed himself a small smile. What renovations would those be, Gloria? A pause. The ones we discussed. For the master's suite and kitchen. Interesting. I don't recall this discussion. Leo, this isn't funny. It's a signed contract. Then I suggest you find a way to pay for it, Leo replied. Or cancel it. Either way, it's your problem, not mine. He ended the call and turned to Barrett, who had been listening while reviewing project documents. Phase 1 begins. Now we need to understand what Adam Kendall's role is in all this. Barrett nodded. I've got a friend in commercial real estate who knows him. I'll make some calls. By evening, the picture had become clearer. Adam Kendall was more than Gloria's interior design partner. He was a failed architect whose business had tanked during the recession. He'd reinvented himself as a designer to the wealthy, using his connections and charm to rebuild his finances. He specialized in helping wealthy women reimagine their spaces, which often coincided with them reimagining their marriages. He's done this before, Barrett reported, showing Leo an online article about a messy divorce involving one of Adam's previous clients. Gets close to unhappy wives, encourages them to invest in massive renovations. Then when the husband balks, he's there to offer sympathy and support. 3 of his last 5 clients ended up divorced within a year of their home transformation projects. Leo processed this information. And the renovations? What happens to those? Usually abandoned halfway through when the financing falls apart. In one case, he actually bought the property at a distressed price after the divorce was finalized. So he's a predator, Leo concluded. And Gloria is his willing prey. Barrett hesitated. There's one more thing. According to my real estate contact, Adam recently listed his Seattle condo. He's moving to Santa Barbara, where he and Gloria were looking at properties. Leo nodded thoughtfully. So that's the plan. Divorce me. Use the settlement to start fresh in California with Adam. Seems likely, Barrett agreed. Leo stood and walked back to the window. The bay was dark now, the lights of West Seattle twinkling in the distance. Where's Flynn staying? With a friend in Capitol Hill. Artist type named Diego. And my parents? Moved their flight back to Florida to tomorrow morning. Leo nodded. Good. Now I need you to do something that might make you uncomfortable. Barrett raised an eyebrow. More uncomfortable than spying on your family? I need you to approach Gloria. Tell her you're concerned about my mental state. That I've been making erratic business decisions. That you're worried about the company. Why would I do that? Leo turned, his expression calculating. Because she'll believe you're trying to protect your own interests. She knows your life is tied to Harmon Construction. She'll think you're looking for an ally to help control the situation. Barrett understood immediately. You want me to be your Trojan horse. Precisely. Find out what she and Adam are really planning. See how deep this betrayal goes. Barrett looked troubled. And then what? Leo's expression hardened. Then I take everything from them. Not just money or property, everything that matters. The way they took what mattered from me. As night fell over Seattle, Leo Harmon stood alone in the penthouse, his reflection ghostly in the darkened window. The hurt had calcified into something hard and cold, a diamond formed under the extreme pressure of betrayal. He would use that diamond to cut through the lies, to sever the bonds that had once tethered him to people who had proven themselves unworthy. He thought of his daughter's wedding, taking place without him. He thought of his son's silent complicity. He thought of his parents' betrayal. And most of all, he thought of Gloria and Adam, planning their new life together while orchestrating his exclusion. They had expected him to rage, to lash out immediately. They didn't understand that his true talent had always been building, constructing something solid, something enduring, something inescapable. His revenge would be no different. Chapter 5. Foundations of Wrath. The renovation crew arrived at the Medina house exactly as scheduled on Monday morning. Gloria greeted them with coffee and pastries, her charm offensive in full swing despite the anxiety gnawing at her insides. The credit cards remained frozen. Her calls to Leo went unanswered, and the contractors expected their deposit today. My husband's handling the payment, she assured the foreman, a burly man named Dwayne. Just a bit of a mix-up with the accounts. Should be sorted by this afternoon. Dwayne nodded skeptically. We can start the demo work today, but we'll need that deposit before we order any materials, Mrs. Harmon. Of course, Gloria said brightly. And please, call me Gloria. As the crew began setting up dust barriers in the kitchen, Gloria retreated to the sunroom and called Adam. They're here, she said quietly. But there's no money. Adam's voice was reassuringly smooth. Don't panic. This is just Leo flexing his muscles. He'll calm down and release the funds. You don't know him like I do, Gloria replied. When Leo decides something, it's carved in stone. Everyone has their price, Adam countered. Or their weakness. We just need to find his. His weakness was Bella, and we've already used that card, Gloria said bitterly. Now he'll never forgive any of us. He doesn't need to forgive. He just needs to pay. After hanging up, Gloria paced the sunroom. Her reflection multiplied in the glass walls that overlooked the manicured garden. Everything had seemed so clear a week ago. The wedding would proceed without Leo. She would ask for the divorce. The renovation would begin, and by the time the dust settled, she'd have a generous settlement and a fresh start with Adam in California. But she had underestimated Leo's capacity for calculated response. He hadn't yelled or threatened or begged. He had simply disappeared taking with him access to the financial resources she'd counted on. A text message notification broke her reverie. Barrett Leary, can we meet? Concern about Leo and the company. Gloria read the message twice. Barrett had always been Leo's right hand, his most trusted lieutenant. If he was reaching out, the situation must be dire indeed. Cafe Louisa, 2 p.m.? She replied. See you there, came the immediate response. While Gloria navigated her crumbling plans, Leo was ensconced in a temporary office Barrett had arranged in a nondescript building in Georgetown, an industrial district south of downtown. The space was utilitarian but functional, with basic furniture and excellent security. Leo had spent the morning conferring with his attorney, Russell Keene, a razor-sharp divorce lawyer known for representing high-net-worth clients. The good news, Russell said, reviewing documents spread across the conference table, is that Washington is a community property state with some significant exceptions. Your business was established before the marriage and has been maintained as a separate entity. The Medina house, however, would typically be considered community property despite being in your name. Leo nodded. And the renovation contract? Russell frowned. If you can prove you didn't authorize it, she's liable for the debt. But it could get messy. Messy is acceptable. Losing is not. There's something else we need to discuss, Russell said, his expression grave. Your daughter's trust fund. Leo stiffened. When Bella was born, he had established a trust fund in her name, adding to it consistently over the years. It now contained nearly $2 million, with Leo as the trustee until Bella turned 30. What about it? There was an attempt to access it last month. The request was denied because it lacked your signature, but someone submitted paperwork to transfer trusteeship to Gloria. Leo's face darkened. Who submitted the paperwork? Russell consulted his notes. The request came from Walter Harmon, with Gloria as co-signatory. My father, Leo said flatly. My own father tried to remove me as trustee of my daughter's fund. The request included a statement suggesting you were making questionable financial decisions and that the trust needed protection. Leo's laugh was devoid of mirth. How convenient. And when exactly was this filed? 3 weeks ago, shortly before the wedding date change. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just about a wedding or a divorce. This was a coordinated effort to isolate him, remove him from both his family and his money. The question was why, and how far they were willing to go. Lock everything down, Leo instructed. Every account, every asset, every property. Nothing moves without my direct authorization. And Russell, find out who else was involved in this attempt. I want names. After Russell departed, Leo turned his attention to the Riverside Heights project, the major development that had been consuming his attention before his world imploded. The contract was signed, the financing secured, but actual construction hadn't begun. An idea began to form, a way to use the project as both shield and sword. His phone buzzed with a text from Barrett. Meeting Gloria at 2. Any specific questions you want answered? Leo thought carefully before responding. Find out who else knows about the trust fund maneuver. And ask about the renovation without revealing you know it's unauthorized. Let her think you might help finance it through the company, if necessary. Barrett's response was immediate. Understood. We'll report back by 4. Leo spent the next hour reviewing the Riverside Heights plans, making notes and adjustments. The project was his company's most ambitious yet, a 60-unit luxury development with commanding views of both the Cascade Mountains and downtown Seattle. If executed properly, it would elevate Harmon Construction to the top tier of development firms on the West Coast. At precisely 2 p.m., Barrett slid into a seat across from Gloria at Cafe Louisa, a quiet establishment known for its discretion and clientele of affluent professionals. Thank you for meeting me, Barrett began, his tone carefully calibrated to convey concern without alarm. Gloria stirred her latte nervously. Of course. You said you're worried about Leo. Barrett nodded gravely. He's making decisions I don't recognize. Pulling money from operational accounts, canceling meetings with major investors, even talking about scrapping the Riverside Heights project entirely. Gloria's eyes widened. Riverside Heights represented years of planning and millions in potential profit. That doesn't sound like Leo. It's not, Barrett agreed. Which is why I'm concerned this divorce situation might be affecting his judgment. The company could suffer irreparable damage. Gloria leaned forward. What exactly are you suggesting, Barrett? I need to stabilize the company while Leo works through this. But I need allies. People who understand what's at stake. And you think I'm such an ally? Gloria asked skeptically. Leo has already frozen me out financially. Barrett looked appropriately sympathetic. Which puts you in a difficult position with the renovation contract, I imagine. Gloria's face tightened almost imperceptibly. You know about that? Leo mentioned it might be a point of contention, Barrett said carefully. A significant financial commitment at an interesting time. It was approved months ago, Gloria insisted. Leo's just being vindictive now. Barrett nodded thoughtfully. The timing is certainly challenging. First the wedding date change, then the divorce announcement, now this renovation issue. The wedding date was Bella's decision, Gloria said defensively. She and Curtis got this incredible opportunity in Singapore, and everything had to be moved up. Leo was simply unavailable. Unavailable, Barrett repeated, despite being home every evening that week. Gloria flushed. It was complicated. Family dynamics you wouldn't understand. Perhaps, Barrett conceded, just as I might not understand the trust fund situation. Gloria froze. What trust fund situation? Barrett affected surprise. Oh, I assumed you knew. The paperwork that was filed to transfer Bella's trust fund management. Leo was quite upset about it. Gloria's hands trembled slightly as she set down her cup. That was Walter's idea. He was concerned about Leo's state of mind recently. And you supported this concern? I signed the paperwork, yes. It was a precautionary measure, nothing more. Barrett nodded slowly. I see. And was this before or after the wedding date change was decided? Before, Gloria admitted after a pause. But the two aren't related. Of course not, Barrett agreed smoothly. Just as the renovation plans and your discussions with Adam Kendall about California properties aren't related to the divorce. Gloria's facade cracked. Who told you about that? Seattle's a small town in certain circles, Barrett replied. People notice things. The tension between them stretched into silence. Finally, Gloria spoke, her voice low and intense. What do you really want, Barrett? Stability for the company. Protection for my own interests. And perhaps an arrangement that could benefit us both during this transition. What kind of arrangement? Barrett leaned closer. I could potentially help with the renovation funding, channeled through the company as a pre-divorce settlement advance. In exchange, I need information about what's really happening with this family situation and assurance that the company's projects won't be collateral damage in your personal war with Leo. Gloria studied him intently. And Leo wouldn't know about this arrangement. Leo has excluded me from major decisions for the first time in 25 years, Barrett said, allowing genuine concern to color his voice. I'm looking out for myself now, just as you are. The calculation was visible in Gloria's eyes, weighing trust against necessity, suspicion against desperation. Finally, she nodded. I need $250,000 by Friday for the first phase of renovations. If you can arrange that, we have a deal. I'll see what I can do, Barrett promised. But I'll need something from you first. A complete picture of what's really going on, including who else is involved in this restructuring of Leo's life. By the time their meeting concluded, Barrett had extracted far more than Gloria realized she had given. Names, dates, plans, and most importantly, the truth behind the wedding deception and trust fund maneuver. The picture it painted was darker than even Leo had suspected. When Barrett returned to the Georgetown office that afternoon, Leo was still working on the Riverside Heights plans, his focus intense and unwavering. You were right, Barrett announced without preamble. It goes deeper than we thought. Leo looked up, his eyes cold. Tell me, Adam Kendall isn't just Gloria's lover. He's been systematically targeting your family for over a year. The house renovations, the California move, even the wedding date change, all part of a coordinated plan. To what end? Barrett sat heavily. Money primarily. Adam's deeply in debt, gambling problems, failed investments. He's been working an angle with Gloria for months, convincing her that you're emotionally detached financially controlling, even potentially unstable. And my father's involvement with the trust fund? Adam convinced Gloria to approach your parents with concerns about your mental state, suggested that your workaholic tendencies might be symptoms of a deeper problem. Walter was reluctant initially, but Wanda pushed him to act for Bella's protection. Leo absorbed this information without visible reaction. And Flynn, manipulated but less involved. Adam cultivated him separately, positioning himself as the understanding father figure who appreciated Flynn's artistic ambitions, unlike his rigid, disapproving real father. "And my daughter?" Leo asked, his voice finally betraying a hint of emotion. "Was she manipulated too? Or did she choose to exclude me from her wedding of her own free will?" Barrett hesitated. "That's less clear. According to Gloria, Bella was genuinely upset about you missing several pre-wedding events due to work." Adam and Gloria apparently enhanced this narrative, suggesting that you might take over the wedding with your opinions and money if given the chance. Leo nodded slowly, processing this betrayal within betrayal. "So Adam orchestrated my removal from my own family to position himself for financial gain through Gloria." "It appears so," Barrett confirmed. "And he nearly succeeded. If the wedding and divorce had gone as planned, if the renovations had proceeded, if the trust fund transfer had been approved, you would have been neatly excised from your family's life while they accessed your money through various channels." Leo's expression hardened into something Barrett had never seen before, a cold, implacable determination that seemed to transform his features. "They chose to make me a ghost," Leo said quietly. "Now I'll show them what a ghost can do." Chapter 6. Laying the Snare. As Seattle's autumn rain lashed against the windows of his Georgetown office, Leo meticulously assembled the pieces of his counterstrike. 3 days had passed since Barrett's meeting with Gloria, 3 days of careful planning and strategic maneuvers that had gone entirely unnoticed by his targets. "The timing needs to be perfect," Leo explained to Barrett, who sat across the desk reviewing a complex flowchart of actions and contingencies. "Each element depends on the others being in place. If we move too quickly or too slowly, the entire structure fails." Barrett nodded, studying the diagram. "It's like one of your buildings. Every beam, every support, precisely calculated. Except this structure is designed to collapse," Leo replied coldly. "But only after everyone is inside." The plan Leo had devised was elegant in its conception, but brutal in its consequences. It began with a seemingly benevolent gesture, the release of funds for the home renovation. "You're going to pay for the renovations, after all?" Barrett asked, surprised. Leo's smile was thin. "In a manner of speaking, the funds will come from Harmon Construction as a company investment in a showcase property. Gloria will believe you arranged it as promised. Adam will believe his plan is back on track. The contractors will get their deposit and begin work. And the catch. The funds are structured as a business loan to Gloria personally, secured by her portion of the community property. Every dollar spent increases her debt to the company. My company, not to me personally. A subtle but critical distinction in divorce proceedings." Barrett whistled softly. "She'll be building herself into a financial hole without realizing it." "Precisely. And while that's happening, I'll be meeting with Curtis's father." Barrett raised an eyebrow. "Bella's new father-in-law? Why?" "Malcolm Crawford owns Cascade Technologies. They're bidding on the commercial space component of Riverside Heights. I'm going to offer him an exclusive deal, at terms so favorable he can't possibly refuse." Understanding dawned on Barrett's face. "You're creating a business alliance with your daughter's new family." "Family supports family," Leo said with a hint of bitterness. "Let's see how the Crawfords respond when they realize that their son's in-laws have effectively erased his wife's father from the most important day of her life." The next phase of Leo's plan involved Flynn. Through carefully planted information, Leo arranged for his son to learn that his art school tuition payments, which Leo had always handled directly, were suddenly at risk due to financial restructuring following the separation. "But you're not actually going to cut off his education, are you?" Barrett asked. "Of course not," Leo replied. "The tuition will be paid, as always. But Flynn will spend at least a week believing his future is in jeopardy. He'll panic, try to reach me, receive no response. He'll turn to Gloria, who will have no answers. He'll stew in the consequences of his choices. For Walter and Wanda Harmon, Leo had reserved a special form of retribution. Through Russell, his attorney, he initiated an audit of the family business that had been passed down to Leo years ago, but still provided his parents with a comfortable retirement income. They'll receive formal notice of the audit tomorrow, Leo explained. Every transaction, every distribution, every decision they've made in their capacity as minority stakeholders will be scrutinized. They'll believe it's routine until the auditors begin asking very specific questions about certain decisions made around the time of the wedding and trust fund incident. Barrett looked concerned. You going to financially ruin your own parents? Leo's expression remained impassive. I'm going to remind them that actions have consequences. The audit will find nothing actionable. I've made sure of that. But they'll live with the fear and uncertainty for months. Just as I now live with the knowledge that my own parents conspired to excise me from my daughter's wedding and my granddaughter's trust fund. The most devastating component of Leo's plan, however, was reserved for Adam Kendall. Through a series of shell companies, Leo had begun systematically purchasing Adam's outstanding debts, gambling markers from casinos, personal loans, credit card balances. Where debts couldn't be purchased, new lines of credit were extended through seemingly unrelated entities. By the end of the month, Leo explained, I will effectively own every dollar of Adam Kendall's considerable debt. He won't know it, of course. The collection agencies will continue to operate as normal for now. And later, Barrett asked, later, when everything else is in place, all debts will come due simultaneously. No extensions, no negotiations, no mercy. The final piece of Leo's design targeted Gloria directly. Using Barrett as the conduit, Leo arranged for Gloria to receive an apparently confidential tip about the Riverside Heights project, specifically that environmental concerns had been discovered that might tank the development and, by extension, Harmon Construction's financial future. She'll believe the company is on the verge of collapse, Leo predicted. She'll accelerate her divorce proceedings, trying to secure a settlement before the supposed environmental issues become public knowledge. Which plays right into your hands, Barrett concluded. Directly into the trap, Leo confirmed. Because her attorney will insist on a full valuation of Harmon Construction as part of the divorce. A valuation that will reveal the company is not only solvent, but poised for unprecedented growth due to the Riverside Heights project and the Crawford partnership. Barrett sat back, absorbing the scope of Leo's revenge. What about Bella? You haven't mentioned how she figures into this. Leo's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Bella will return from her honeymoon to find her family in disarray. Her mother facing financial ruin, her brother's education in apparent jeopardy, her grandparents under investigation, and her father, the man she chose to exclude from the most important day of her life, emerging as the wrong party who nevertheless controls everyone's fate. You think she'll understand why you've done this? Understanding isn't required, Leo said quietly. Only recognition of the truth. That choices have consequences, that betrayal begets destruction, that the foundations we build our lives upon must be solid, or everything collapses. As the rain intensified outside, drumming against the windows with increasing fury, Leo turned to a set of architectural drawings. The original plans for the Medina house he had designed and built for his family 15 years earlier. Tell the renovation crew to proceed according to these modified plans, he instructed Barrett, sliding across a sealed envelope. They're to tell Gloria these changes came directly from me as a reconciliation gesture. The alterations look minor, but will require opening up several key walls and structural elements. Barrett took the envelope cautiously. What exactly am I giving them? Leo's smile was cold. The means to destroy the house from within, one renovation at a time. By the time they're finished, the place will be architecturally compromised beyond repair. Beautiful on the surface, rotting underneath. Rather like my marriage. Barrett studied his friend and employer with growing concern. Leo, this is comprehensive. Are you sure this is what you want? Once this is set in motion. It already is in motion, Leo interrupted. It was set in motion the moment they decided I was expendable. I'm simply ensuring that the structure of consequences is built to my specifications, not theirs. Outside, lightning flashed across the Seattle skyline, briefly illuminating Leo's face in stark relief. A man transformed by betrayal. His features hardened into something unrecognizable from the father and husband he had once been. The architect of vengeance was ready to break ground. Chapter 7. The First Tremors. 1 month after Leo's disappearance from his family's life, the first tremors of his carefully engineered revenge began to register. Like a sequence of controlled demolition charges, each detonation was precisely timed and targeted for maximum effect. Flynn Harmon was the first to feel the ground shift beneath his feet. On a rainy Tuesday morning, he received an email from the registrar's office at his art school. Final notice. Payment required for continued enrollment. According to the message, his tuition for the current semester remained unpaid, with a deadline of Friday for resolution before administrative withdrawal would be processed. Panic bloomed in Flynn's chest. His father had always handled the tuition payments directly, an arrangement Flynn had both resented for its implication of dependency and appreciated for its convenience. Now, with his parents separated and his father seemingly vanished from their lives, the financial reality of his situation struck with brutal force. Flynn immediately called Gloria, who was supervising the ongoing renovations at the Medina house. "Mom, did you know Dad stopped paying my tuition?" he demanded without preamble. Gloria stepped away from the construction noise into the relative quiet of the backyard patio. "What? No, that can't be right. He wouldn't do that." "Well, he did," Flynn snapped. "I just had a final notice. I have 3 days before they kick me out." Gloria closed her eyes, feeling the weight of yet another crisis. The renovations had resumed thanks to the mysterious company funding Barrett had arranged, but everything else was falling apart. The credit cards remained frozen, the divorce proceedings had turned ugly, and now this. "How much is needed?" she asked wearily. $22,000, Flynn replied. "For this semester alone." The sum hung between them like an accusation. Gloria had less than $5,000 in her personal account. All that remained of the cash advances she'd taken before Leo froze the credit cards. "I'll figure something out," she promised hollowly. "Have you tried calling your father?" Flynn's laugh was bitter. "Every day for the past month. He doesn't answer, doesn't return messages. It's like he's dead to us. Or we're dead to him," Gloria murmured. After hanging up, Gloria tried calling Leo herself, reaching his voicemail as expected. Then she called Adam, who had become increasingly distant as the financial complications mounted. "Adam, we have another problem," she began when he answered. His sigh was audible. "What now?" "Leo stopped paying Flynn's tuition. $22,000 due by Friday, or he's out of school." "That's unfortunate," Adam replied carefully, "but not entirely unexpected, given the circumstances." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you all made a decision to exclude Leo from a significant family event. Actions have consequences, Gloria." She felt a chill at his tone. "I thought you understood why we did that. You encouraged it, if I recall correctly." "I offered perspective based on what you told me about Leo's emotional disengagement," Adam corrected. "The decision was ultimately yours and your family's." The subtle distancing wasn't lost on Gloria. "But you're saying we deserve what's happening?" "I'm saying we need to be realistic about the situation. Leo is clearly methodically responding to what he perceives as betrayal. My concern is how far he's willing to go." "What about the house in Santa Barbara?" Gloria pressed. "Is that still happening?" Adam paused. "Let's focus on getting through the current situation before making additional plans. I need to go. I have clients waiting." As Adam ended the call, Gloria stood alone on the patio, watching the renovation crew gut what had once been her perfect kitchen. The house that had been her haven was now unrecognizable. Walls removed, floors torn up, dust everywhere. Much like her life. Inside, the renovation foreman, Dwayne, was reviewing the modified plans that had arrived via Barrett last week. The changes were extensive despite being presented as minor adjustments. removing a load-bearing wall to open up the space, relocating plumbing fixtures for better flow, rewiring significant portions of the house for smart home integration. Mrs. Harmon, Dwayne called as Gloria re-entered. We need to discuss these structural changes. They're more complicated than initially presented. Gloria waved a dismissive hand. Just follow the plans. My husband is paying for this. We might as well get everything done properly. Dwayne frowned. These modifications will add at least 3 weeks to the timeline and significantly increase the budget. Fine, Gloria said tiredly. Just do it. Send the revised estimates to Barrett Leary at Harmon Construction. As Gloria navigated her domestic crisis, across town in a sleek downtown office building, Walter and Wanda Harmon sat uncomfortably across from a team of forensic accountants. The audit of the family business had expanded beyond routine review into what felt increasingly like a criminal investigation. Could you explain again the purpose of these distributions? Asked the lead auditor, a severe woman named Collins, pointing to a series of transactions from the previous year. Walter shifted nervously. Those were standard retirement distributions, part of my compensation package when I transferred majority control to Leo. And these transfers to the Harmon family trust occurred when, exactly? Wanda cleared her throat. Approximately 3 weeks before our granddaughter's wedding. The same time period during which you attempted to remove Leo Harmon as trustee of Isabella Harmon's trust fund, correct? Walter's face flushed. That was a precautionary measure based on concerns about our son's judgment at the time. Collins made a note. Yet you continued to accept distributions authorized by the same son whose judgment you claimed to distrust. That was different, Wanda protested. We never questioned Leo's business acumen, only his emotional availability to his family. I see, Collins replied, her tone making it clear she didn't see it all. We'll need complete documentation of all conversations regarding both the trust fund matter and these distributions. Emails, texts, notes from phone calls, everything. As the auditors continued their methodical dismantling of the Harmons' financial lives, Walter leaned toward Wanda and whispered, Leo is behind this. He's punishing us. For what? Wanda whispered back. Loving our granddaughter? Trying to protect her future. Walter's expression was grim. For choosing sides. For forgetting that Leo was our child long before Bella was our grandchild. Meanwhile, in a tastefully appointed conference room with views of Elliott Bay, Leo sat across from Malcolm Crawford, Curtis's father and CEO of Cascade Technologies. The two men had been engaged in negotiations for over an hour, their conversation moving from careful formality to increasing warmth. I have to say, Leo, these terms are exceptionally favorable, Malcolm remarked, reviewing the proposal for Cascade's exclusive rights to the commercial spaces in Riverside Heights. Almost too favorable. What's the catch? Leo smiled pleasantly. No catch, Malcolm. I believe in building relationships, not just buildings. Our children have united our families. This is simply good business that recognizes that new reality. Malcolm nodded thoughtfully. Curtis speaks very highly of Bella. They seem genuinely happy together. I'm glad to hear it, Leo replied, his expression revealing nothing of the pain beneath. Family is everything, after all. Which reminds me, Malcolm said, setting down the contract. Curtis mentioned there was some awkwardness around the wedding. Something about a date change in your absence. Leo's response was measured. There was a misunderstanding about the date. Unfortunately, I missed my only daughter's wedding as a result. Malcolm frowned. That seems like quite a misunderstanding. Curtis was under the impression it was somehow intentional. Was he? Leo asked mildly. Interesting. What else did Curtis share about the situation? Malcolm looked uncomfortable. Only that Bella seemed upset about the whole thing. That she felt torn between her mother's wishes and her desire to have her father present. Leo leaned forward slightly. Her mother's wishes? Not her own. I got the impression it was complicated, Malcolm admitted. Family dynamics often are. Indeed, Leo agreed. Perhaps you could ask Curtis to clarify something when they return from their honeymoon. Ask him who told Bella I didn't want to attend her wedding. Malcolm's surprise was evident. Someone told her that? It appears so, Leo replied calmly. Just as someone arranged for my daughter's wedding date to be changed without my knowledge, for my invitation to be lost, and for my entire family to participate in an elaborate deception that resulted in me standing alone at an empty venue on what I believed was my daughter's wedding day. Malcolm paled. My God, Leo, I had no idea. Few do, Leo acknowledged. Now, shall we sign these contracts and cement a more honest relationship between our families? As Malcolm signed the agreements with a slightly shaky hand, Leo allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The Crawford connection was now secured, a bridge to Bella that neither Gloria nor Adam could sever. By sunset, the first day of Leo's orchestrated revenge had unfolded precisely as planned. Flynn was panicking about his education. Gloria was struggling with mounting renovation costs and Adam's waning support. Walter and Wanda were facing financial scrutiny that threatened their comfortable retirement. And Bella, still blissfully honeymooning in Bali, remained unaware of the earthquake that awaited her return. Leo stood at the window of his Georgetown office, watching the city lights emerge against the darkening sky. Barrett entered silently, placing a folder on the desk behind him. It's done, Barrett reported. The debt consolidation for Kindle is complete. We now control over $900,000 of his outstanding obligations. Leo nodded without turning. And the timing? As instructed, all collection proceedings will initiate simultaneously, 48 hours after Bella and Curtis return from their honeymoon. Good, Leo said softly. Everything is proceeding as designed. Barrett hesitated. There's one more thing. Gloria called me today, desperate about Flynn's tuition. She's considering selling her jewelry to cover it. Is she now? Leo turned, his expression unreadable. Tell me, Barrett, if someone tried to erase you from your child's most important day, if they conspire to take your money and your dignity, would you rush to solve their problems? Barrett met his friend's gaze steadily. No, but I might worry about becoming someone I don't recognize in the process of punishing them. Leo's smile was cold. The man they knew no longer exists. They saw to that themselves. As night fell over Seattle, the architect of vengeance reviewed his blueprints one final time, ensuring every support was in place, every foundation properly laid for the collapse to come. The demolition had begun. Chapter 8. The Collapse. Bella Harmon Crawford stepped off the elevator into the lobby of the Olympic Hotel, her new husband Curtis trailing behind with their luggage. After 12 days in Bali, she was jet-lagged but happy, her honeymoon having been everything she dreamed. Romantic beaches, luxurious accommodations, and the giddy realization that she was finally married to the man she loved. Should we grab lunch before heading to your mom's? Curtis asked as they crossed the marble lobby. Bella checked her phone, which was finally reconnected to cellular service after nearly 2 weeks off the grid. Let me just see if there are any messages first. The deluge that greeted her was overwhelming. 17 missed calls from Flynn, 23 text messages from her mother, 8 voicemails from her grandmother Wanda, even 3 messages from Curtis's father, Malcolm, which was unusual enough to be concerning. Something's wrong, Bella murmured, scrolling through the texts with growing alarm. Everyone's freaking out about Dad. Curtis frowned. Your dad? I thought he was keeping his distance after, the wedding situation. Bella felt the familiar twist of guilt in her stomach. The decision to proceed with the wedding without her father had been the hardest of her life. Her mother and grandmother had insisted it was necessary given the Singapore Opportunities timeline, had assured her that her father would understand eventually. Adam had reinforced the idea, suggesting that Leo would likely make the day about himself anyway. But standing at the altar without her father had left a hollow feeling that even Curtis's love couldn't quite fill. It's more than just distance, Bella said, reading rapidly through the messages. Something major has happened. Mom says she's about to lose the house, Flynn might get kicked out of school, and Grandma and Grandpa are being investigated for fraud. She looked up at Curtis in confusion. What the hell happened while we were gone? Before Curtis could respond, his own phone rang. He glanced at the screen. It's my dad. Maybe he knows something. The conversation was brief but illuminating. When Curtis hung up, his expression was troubled. My dad wants us to come to his office right away. He says there's something we need to know about your father. And it's not what your family has been telling you. Across town in the Medina house, Gloria sat surrounded by chaos. Both the physical disorder of the ongoing renovations and the financial disaster unfolding on her laptop screen. The renovation budget had somehow doubled. Flynn's tuition remained unpaid with the deadline now passed. And her divorce attorney had just informed her that Leo's legal team was challenging her claim to any portion of Harmon construction, citing separate property laws and alleged financial misconduct. The doorbell rang, cutting through the sound of power tools and workmen's voices. Gloria navigated through the construction debris to find Adam Kendall on her doorstep, his normally confident demeanor replaced by barely concealed panic. "We need to talk," he said without greeting, pushing past her into what remained of the foyer. Privately, Gloria led him to the home office, the only room relatively untouched by the renovations. "What's wrong? You look terrible." "I'm being financially crucified," Adam replied, pacing the small space. "Every debt I have, and there are more than I ever told you about, has suddenly come due simultaneously. Credit cards, casino markers, personal loans, tax liens, all of them within hours of each other. It's not coincidence, Gloria. It's coordinated." Gloria sank into the desk chair. "Leo, who else? He must have somehow purchased my debts through shell companies or intermediaries. No normal collection pattern works this way." Adam ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I owe nearly $1 million, Gloria. They're freezing my accounts, putting liens on my condo, even repossessing my car. It's a complete financial execution." Gloria felt cold dread spreading through her. "Why would Leo target you this way? He barely knows you." Adam laughed bitterly. "Because he knows everything, Gloria. About us, about the wedding deception, about the California plans. Everything. How could he possibly?" Gloria stopped suddenly, realization dawning. Barrett Leary has been feeding him information. "The renovation funding," Adam nodded grimly. "It was a trap, and we walked right into it. But why would Barrett betray Leo like that? They've been friends for decades." Adam stared at her incredulously. "He didn't betray Leo. He betrayed us. He was working for Leo the entire time, gathering intelligence, setting us up." Before Gloria could respond, the office door flew open. Flynn stood there, his face a mask of fury. "My education is gone. Did you know that? Not just this semester, all of it. The school received notification that all previous payments were made under fraudulent pretenses and are being investigated. My entire transcript is on hold." Gloria rose shakily. "Flynn, we'll figure something out." "Figure something out?" Flynn's voice rose. "Like you figured out how to exclude Dad from Bella's wedding? Or how you figured Grandma and Grandpa needed to take over Bella's trust fund? How's all that figuring working out for everyone?" Adam stepped forward. "This isn't helping, Flynn. We need to present a united front." "We?" Flynn rounded on him. "There is no we here, Adam. You're just a guy who helped my mother blow up our family for your own benefit. At least that's what Grandpa finally admitted when the investigators started asking specific questions about your involvement." Gloria paled. "What are you talking about? What investigators?" "The forensic accounting team that's been tearing apart Grandma and Grandpa's finances for weeks," Flynn explained furiously. "They finally broke down and told me everything. How Adam suggested they try to take control of Bella's trust fund. How he convinced Mom that Dad was emotionally unsafe around us. How he orchestrated this whole disaster." Adam's face hardened. "Your mother made her own choices. We all did, based on what you told us." Flynn shouted. "Based on your lies about Dad's mental state, about his intentions, about everything." The confrontation was interrupted by the arrival of Dwayne, the renovation foreman, looking grim. "Mrs. Harmon, we have a serious problem. The structural changes in the modified plans. They've compromised the integrity of the entire east wing of the house. We just found significant foundation damage that wasn't visible until we opened up the walls." Gloria stared at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the house is becoming structurally unsound," Dwayne explained. "These modifications your husband insisted on, they've essentially created a slow-motion demolition. Every wall we remove according to these plans weakens another supporting element. That's impossible, Gloria whispered. Leo designed this house himself. He would never. He would if he wanted to destroy it without ever swinging a hammer himself. Flynn said quietly. Don't you see, Mom? He's dismantling everything. The house, your finances, your relationship with Adam, my education, Grandma and Grandpa's retirement. And he's doing it using our own actions against us. As the implications sank in, Gloria's phone rang. It was Bella. Mom, we need to talk. Curtis and I are with Malcolm Crawford, and I've just learned what really happened with Dad in the wedding. In the sleek offices of Cascade Technologies, Leo sat across from his daughter for the first time since the wedding betrayal. Bella's face was tear-streaked, her honeymoon tan unable to mask her pallor. Curtis stood supportively behind her chair, while Malcolm Crawford observed silently from behind his desk. Why didn't you tell me? Bella asked, her voice small and broken. Why didn't you fight harder to be at my wedding? Leo's expression remained carefully neutral. Would you have believed me if I had told you that your mother, your brother, and your grandparents all conspired to change your wedding date without my knowledge? That they deliberately excluded me from the most important day of your life? Bella shook her head. I was told you were unavailable, that you had chosen a business meeting over the rehearsal dinner, that you'd said the new date didn't work for you. All lies, Leo said simply. I stood alone at an empty venue on what I believed was your wedding day, Bella. I was never given the choice to attend. But why would they do this? Bella asked, fresh tears spilling. Why would Mom and everyone else go to such lengths? I believe that's a question you should ask them, Leo replied, along with questions about your trust fund, which your grandparents attempted to remove from my control 3 weeks before your wedding. Bella looked stunned. My trust fund? Why would they? Because Adam Kendall convinced them I was mentally unstable, Leo explained calmly. The same Adam Kendall who has been having an affair with your mother for at least a year. The same Adam Kendall who helped orchestrate my exclusion from your wedding and planned to help your mother start a new life in California with your divorce settlement. Curtis stepped forward. My father confirmed it all, Bella. He's seen the documentation, the text messages, the financial records. Everything your father is saying is true. Bella covered her face with her hands. This can't be happening. I'm afraid it is, Leo said, his tone softening slightly. And there's more. Your mother's renovation project? It's designed to systematically destroy the structural integrity of the house. Flynn's education? His transcript is currently frozen because the tuition payments are under investigation. Your grandparents' retirement income? Being scrutinized by forensic accountants as we speak. Bella looked up, horror dawning on her face. You're destroying them. All of them. Leo met her gaze steadily. They chose to erase me from your wedding day, from your life. I'm simply ensuring that choice has consequences. But this level of revenge, Bella whispered, is precisely calibrated to the betrayal Leo finished for her. Every action I've taken is a direct response to an action taken against me. The difference is that I'm acting openly, while they operated through deception and manipulation. Malcolm Crawford cleared his throat. Leo has been completely transparent with me about his intentions. Bella, while I can't condone all his methods, I understand his motivations. What was done to him was unconscionable. Bella stood suddenly. I need to see Mom. I need to hear her side of this. Of course, Leo nodded. That's your right. But before you go, there's something you should know. Despite everything, your trust fund remains intact and under my protection. Unlike the others, you were manipulated rather than manipulative. You're as much a victim of their scheme as I was. Bella paused at the door. Does that mean you forgive me? Leo's expression remained impassive. Forgiveness isn't relevant anymore, Bella. Only truth matters now. And the truth is that choices have consequences for everyone. As Bella and Curtis departed, Malcolm turned to Leo. Was that necessary? She's devastated. The truth often is devastating, Leo replied. But it's preferable to comfortable lies. And now, Malcolm asked, where does your revenge end? Leo stood, straightening his jacket. It ends when justice is complete. When everyone involved has paid the full price for their betrayal. Even if that means destroying your own family? Leo smiled coldly. My family was destroyed the moment they decided I was expendable. I'm simply ensuring they understand exactly what they've lost. As Leo left Cascade Technologies, his phone buzzed with a message from Barrett. Gloria just tried to secure an emergency loan against the house. Request denied due to structural concerns raised by her own renovation contractor. She's panicking. Leo sent a single reply. Proceed to final phase. The architect of vengeance had reached the culmination of his design. The supports were compromised, the foundation undermined. All that remained was to remove the final beam and watch the entire structure collapse under its own corrupt weight. Chapter 9. Ashes and Iron. The Medina house stood silent in the gray morning light, its elegant exterior belying the chaos within. Yellow caution tape cordoned off the east wing, where structural engineers had confirmed what Dwayne the foreman had discovered. The renovations had fatally compromised the home's integrity. Remediation would cost more than the original construction. Inside the untouched West Wing living room, the remnants of the Harmon family gathered like survivors of a natural disaster. Gloria sat rigid on the edge of the sofa, her normally perfect appearance disheveled after days of crisis. Flynn paced by the windows, occasionally checking his phone for updates on his academic situation. Walter and Wanda Harmon occupied matching armchairs, looking older than their years, the stress of the financial investigation evident in their posture and expressions. Adam Kendall was conspicuously absent, having disappeared the previous day after learning that his condo had been foreclosed upon and his design business assets frozen. Bella stood by the fireplace, Curtis's supportive presence beside her. The honeymoon tan had faded from her face, replaced by the pallor of shock and disillusionment. "He'll be here soon," Bella said to no one in particular. "He agreed to meet with all of us together." Gloria laughed humorlessly. "To what end? So he can gloat over his perfect revenge? So he can watch us grovel and beg? So we can face the truth," Bella replied firmly. "All of us, together. No more lies, no more manipulation." The doorbell rang, its familiar chime now seeming like an alarm. Flynn moved to answer it, returning moments later with Leo and Barrett. Leo surveyed the assembled family with the detached interest of a scientist observing specimens. Barrett remained by the door, a silent sentinel. "Thank you for coming, Dad," Bella said into the strained silence. Leo nodded once. "You asked. I came. A courtesy some members of this family might consider adopting." Walter cleared his throat. "Son, we understand you're angry." "Angry doesn't begin to encompass what I am," Leo interrupted calmly. "Anger is a hot, immediate emotion. What I feel is something far colder and more enduring." "We made a mistake," Wanda said, her voice quavering. "A terrible mistake. We should never have gone along with excluding you from Bella's wedding." "A mistake," Leo repeated. "Is that what we're calling coordinated betrayal these days? A simple error in judgment." Gloria stood. "What do you want from us, Leo? You've destroyed everything already. The house is falling apart. Flynn's education is in jeopardy. Your parents are facing financial ruin. Adam has fled. What more do you want?" "Justice," Leo replied simply, "which is why I've asked Barrett to distribute these." He nodded to his colleague, who began handing out sealed envelopes to each person in the room. "What are these?" Flynn asked suspiciously. "Open them and see." With varying degrees of trepidation, each member of the family opened their envelope. Inside each was a single document, different for each recipient, but all bearing the Harmon Construction letterhead and Leo's signature. Flynn was the first to understand what he held. "This is a tuition guarantee for the completion of my degree. Full funding, no conditions." Wanda gasped as she read her document. "The audit is terminated, with no findings of wrongdoing." Walter studied his paper with disbelief. "Our retirement distributions are secured for life, regardless of future company performance." Gloria's hands trembled as she held her document. "The house renovations will be completely remediated at no cost to me, and I receive ownership of the summer cabin in Oregon as part of the divorce settlement." Bella looked up from her paper, tears in her eyes. "My trust fund remains intact, and you've established a separate fund for any children Curtis and I might have. Leo observed their reactions with clinical detachment. Each of you receives exactly what you need most: financial security, education, housing, future protection. Everything you feared losing when my revenge began. Gloria looked confused. I don't understand. After everything we did, you're just giving us what we need. On the contrary, Leo replied coldly, I'm giving you exactly what you deserve. Financial security without emotional connection. Material comfort without family bonds. Money without love or trust. The realization dawned on each face gradually. The true nature of Leo's ultimate revenge. You're removing yourself from our lives, Bella whispered. Permanently. Leo nodded. You all made the decision that I was unnecessary for family milestones, that my presence was expendable, my participation optional. I'm simply making that arrangement permanent and comprehensive. But these documents, Walter began, are legally binding and irrevocable, Leo confirmed. Your material needs will be met for the rest of your lives. But there is one condition detailed on the final page of each agreement. Flynn turned to the last page of his document and read aloud. In exchange for the financial security provided herein, the recipient agrees to no further contact, communication, or attempted reconciliation with Leo Harmon, effective immediately and in perpetuity. Silence fell over the room as the full implications became clear. You can't be serious, Gloria finally said. You're buying our absence from your life? I'm formalizing the arrangement you all initiated. Leo corrected her. You decided I wasn't necessary as a father, husband, or son. I'm simply making it official and ensuring you understand exactly what you're losing in exchange for financial comfort. Wanda began to cry softly. Leo, please. We made a terrible mistake, but this is too harsh. Is it? Leo countered. Was it not harsh to exclude me from my only daughter's wedding? Was it not harsh to attempt to take control of her trust fund behind my back? Was it not harsh to lie to my face for weeks while planning to start a new life with another man? He looked around the room. You all chose material comfort and emotional convenience over loyalty and honesty. Now you get to live with that choice permanently. Barrett stepped forward, placing a sleek fountain pen on the coffee table. Each of you needs to sign your document today. The benefits begin immediately upon signature. Flynn looked stricken. And if we refuse, then you receive nothing, Leo said simply. No tuition, no house repairs, no retirement security, no trust fund. You chose to gamble with our family bonds. These are the stakes. Curtis, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. Sir, I understand your pain. But Bella wasn't the architect of this deception. She was misled like you were. Leo turned to his son-in-law. Yet she made her choice based on that misinformation. We all live with the consequences of our choices, Curtis, even when those choices are made with incomplete information. Bella stepped toward her father, tears streaming down her face. Dad, please. I know we hurt you terribly. I will regret excluding you from my wedding for the rest of my life. But this, cutting yourself off from all of us forever, this isn't justice. It's self-punishment too. For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed Leo's face. Perhaps, but it's the only path forward I can see. Gloria approached her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, with a dignity she had struggled to maintain throughout the crisis. You never were one for half measures, Leo. You built our life together brick by brick, and now you're dismantling it with the same thoroughness. She picked up the pen. I'll sign, not because I want your money, but because I recognize this is the consequence of my betrayal. One by one, each family member signed their document. Flynn, with angry, slashing strokes. Walter and Wanda, with shaking hands and tears. Bella last, her signature barely legible through her grief. Barrett collected the signed papers, placing them in his briefcase. I'll have copies sent to each of you for your records. Leo surveyed the ruins of his family one final time. The renovations will begin tomorrow. The tuition payment will be processed immediately. The audit termination is already filed. Everything else will proceed according to the timelines in your documents. He turned to leave, but Bella's voice stopped him. Dad, wait. What about forgiveness? Isn't that part of justice too? Leo paused, his back to the room. Forgiveness requires repentance and restitution. You've provided neither. You simply got caught, and now face consequences you didn't anticipate. So, there's no chance for reconciliation? Ever? Flynn asked, his earlier anger now tempered with dawning loss. Leo turned slightly. You all made a choice that day, to erase me from what should have been one of the most important moments of my life as a father. Now I'm making mine, to accept that erasure and make it complete. Leo, please, Gloria tried one last time. 30 years of marriage. 2 children together. Doesn't that count for anything? It counted for nothing when you decided to exclude me from our daughter's wedding, Leo replied coldly. When you plotted with Adam Kindle to take my money and start a new life. When you lied to my face day after day. He looked around the room. Each of you chose comfort over honesty, convenience over loyalty, easy lies over difficult truth. These agreements merely formalize what you already decided. With that, Leo turned and walked out, Barrett following after a brief nod to the assembled family. The front door closed with a quiet click that sounded like the final period on the end of story. In the silent living room, the Harmon family faced each other as strangers united only by the ashes of what they had burned. Bella was the first to speak. What have we done? No one had an answer. Outside, Leo settled into the passenger seat of Barrett's car. The overcast sky had begun to clear, rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds over Lake Washington. Are you sure about this? Barrett asked quietly as he started the engine. It's a high price to pay for justice. Leo watched his former home recede in the side mirror. They made their choice when they decided I was expendable. I'm simply honoring that decision. And Bella? She was manipulated by the others. She made her choice, Leo repeated, his voice devoid of emotion. Now she lives with it, just as I live with mine. Barrett nodded slowly. Where to now? Leo turned away from the window. Riverside Heights. We have a building to construct. As they drove toward the future Leo had designed, one built on the ashes of betrayal but forged with iron determination. He felt no joy in his victory, no satisfaction in his revenge. Only the cold certainty that, like every structure he had ever built, this one too would stand the test of time. Unforgiving, unyielding, and utterly complete. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Call. Santos Mueller had always been a man who trusted his instincts. 20 years as a federal investigator for the Treasury Department had honed those instincts to razor sharpness. But nothing could have prepared him for the phone call that would shatter his world and rebuild it into something far more dangerous. The Denver International Airport grew smaller in his rearview mirror as he navigated the familiar route home. His wife, Lynette, sat beside him, her auburn hair catching the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the passenger window. She was scrolling through photos on her phone from their weekend in San Francisco, occasionally showing him pictures of their visit to his sister's new gallery opening. Look at this, one of you and Marcella. Lynette laughed, holding up a shot of Santos with his arm around his sister. You both have that same stubborn jaw when you're trying to look serious. Santos smiled, glancing at the photo. The weekend had been perfect, a rare break from the high-stakes financial crime cases that usually consumed his life. Lynette had been radiant at the gallery, charming everyone she met with her infectious enthusiasm for art and life. She was a pediatric nurse at Denver General, and her natural warmth drew people like a magnet. Your sister's paintings are incredible, Lynette continued. That landscape series could easily be in a major museum. Don't let success go to her head, Santos replied, but his voice was warm with pride. The Mueller siblings had clawed their way up from nothing. Their father abandoned them when Santos was 12, leaving their mother to raise 2 kids on a waitress's salary. Santos had put himself through college and law enforcement training, while Marcella had fought for every art scholarship and gallery showing. They'd both learned early that in life, you either fought for what you wanted or watched others take it from you. His phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. The caller ID showed unknown number, which usually meant work. Santos almost let it go to voicemail. He wasn't officially back on duty until Monday, but something made him answer. Santos Mueller. Mr. Mueller? This is Jonathan Pearson with Air Traffic Control at Denver International. I'm calling about your wife's flight from San Francisco. Santos felt a chill run down his spine. What about it? She's right here with me. There was a pause. Sir, I need to inform you that Flight 447 from San Francisco experienced a serious incident. We've been trying to locate all passengers, and there's no record of the aircraft ever completing its landing sequence. Santos pulled over to the shoulder, his heart hammering. That's impossible. I picked her up at baggage claimed 2 hours ago. She's sitting right next to me. Lynette looked up from her phone, concern creasing her features. What's wrong? Sir, Pearson's voice was tight with something Santos recognized as fear. What did you say? I said she's sitting right here in my car. We just left the airport. This is obviously some kind of mistake or system error. The line went quiet for several seconds. Santos could hear muffled voices in the background, then Pearson's voice again, but now he was speaking to someone else. He says she's with him. In his car. Right now. More muffled conversation. Then Pearson came back on the line, his voice now urgent. Mr. Mueller, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Stay in your vehicle. Lock the doors. Do not get out of the car under any circumstances. What the hell is going on? Santos demanded, but even as he said it, his investigator's mind was already processing the implications. Something was very wrong. Sir, the woman who was in seat 14A on Flight 447, according to our records, she didn't survive the incident. We found her, the line cut to static, then went dead. Santos stared at his phone, then slowly turned to look at Lynette. She was watching him with those familiar green eyes, her expression puzzled but not alarmed. Santos? Who was that? You look like you've seen a ghost. The words hit him like a physical blow. Ghost. He studied her face, searching for something, anything, that seemed off. But it was Lynette, the tiny scar above her left eyebrow from falling off her bike at age 7, the way her nose crinkled when she was confused, the small birthmark on her neck. Every detail was exactly right. It was... Santos started, then stopped. His training kicked in. Gather information. Trust but verify. It was someone claiming to be from air traffic control. They said there was some kind of problem with your flight. That's weird. The flight was perfectly normal. We landed on time. Lynette reached over and touched his hand. Her fingers were warm, solid, real. You're shaking. What exactly did they say? Santos made a decision. Whatever was happening, he needed to control the situation. Probably just some mix-up with flight numbers. You know how these things go. He put the car in drive and pulled back onto the highway, but his mind was racing. As a federal investigator, Santos had seen enough to know that when something seemed impossible, it usually meant you didn't have all the facts yet. People didn't just die in plane crashes and then show up sitting in cars. There had to be an explanation, mistaken identity, computer error, elaborate hoax, something. But as they drove toward their home in Cherry Creek, Santos found himself studying Lynette out of the corner of his eye. Everything about her seemed normal, but that phone call had injected a poison of doubt into his mind. He thought about the weekend in San Francisco, replaying every moment. Had there been anything strange? Any detail that didn't fit? Santos, you're making me nervous, Lynette said. You've got that look you get when you're working a case. Just thinking about work stuff, he lied smoothly. You know how it is. But that wasn't true. Santos was thinking about the fact that in 20 years of federal investigations, he'd learned that the most dangerous people were often the ones who seemed the most trustworthy. He'd put away embezzlers who were pillars of their communities, murderers who coached Little League, terrorists who taught Sunday school. The woman sitting next to him was either his wife of 8 years, or she was someone, or something else entirely. And until he figured out which, Santos Mueller wasn't taking any chances. As they pulled into their driveway, Santos's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it quickly, keeping his expression neutral. It was from a number he didn't recognize. The investigation begins now. Trust no one. A friend. Santos deleted the message and smiled at Lynette as they walked toward their front door. But his hand instinctively moved to check his concealed carry permit pistol under his jacket. Whatever game was being played, Santos Mueller intended to win. Chapter 2. Shadows of Doubt. The Mueller home in Cherry Creek had always been Santos's sanctuary, a place where the dark realities of financial crimes and federal investigations couldn't touch him. But as he watched Lynette move through their familiar routines that evening, every gesture felt like it was being performed under a microscope. She made dinner exactly the way she always did. Pasta with the homemade marinara sauce she'd learned from her Italian grandmother. A simple salad with a balsamic vinaigrette she mixed from scratch. She hummed while she cooked, the same Joni Mitchell song she always hummed. When she reached for the oregano on the top shelf, she had to stretch on her tiptoes just like always, and Santos automatically moved to help her, just like he had hundreds of times before. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. So tell me about this case you'll be working on when you get back, Lynette said as they sat down to eat. It was exactly the kind of question she always asked, interested in his work, but respectful of what he couldn't share. Complex financial fraud investigation, Santos replied, cutting his pasta. International wire transfers, shell companies. The usual boring stuff. It was a lie. Santos had actually requested to be transferred to a new case starting Monday. Something involving defense contractor fraud that would keep him in Denver for the foreseeable future. He'd made the request 6 months ago, not wanting to travel as much, wanting to spend more time with Lynette. But this woman wouldn't know that. Sounds fascinating, she said with a smile. Will you be traveling much? Santos paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. In 8 years of marriage, Lynette had never once described his financial fraud cases as fascinating. She was supportive, but she found the technical details mind-numbingly dull. She usually asked about travel to gauge how much time they'd have together, not out of interest in the work itself. Not much, he said carefully. Mostly local stuff. After dinner, Santos excused himself to his home office while Lynette settled in to watch a movie. He closed the door and immediately got to work, using his federal access to pull information about Flight 447. What he found made his blood run cold. Flight 447 from San Francisco to Denver had indeed experienced an incident, but the details were heavily classified, far beyond even his security clearance. The passenger manifest showed Lynette Mueller in seat 14A, but her status was listed as unconfirmed. Most disturbing of all, the flight had been diverted to a private airfield outside Colorado Springs, not Denver International. Santos dug deeper, using contacts and databases he probably shouldn't have been accessing. Jonathan Pearson was real. He did work air traffic control at Denver International. But there was no record of him making any calls that afternoon. In fact, Pearson had been off duty at his daughter's soccer game in Thornton. Someone had spoofed Pearson's identity to make that call. Someone wanted Santos to know about Flight 447, but they wanted it to seem like an accident, a routine notification. Santos's phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. Check the bedroom closet. Third shelf. Behind the winter coats. Santos stared at the message, his heart pounding. Someone was watching him, guiding him. But who? And why? He crept upstairs, pausing to listen. The TV was still playing downstairs, some romantic comedy Lynette loved. He could hear her laughing at all the right moments. In their bedroom closet, Santos pushed aside winter coats and found something that made him question his sanity, a small metal box he'd never seen before. Inside was a passport with Lynette's photo, but a different name, Rebecca May, and documentation showing she'd entered the country from Canada 3 days ago. His hands shook as he examined the documents. They were professionally done, not forgeries. The woman downstairs, the woman who cooked exactly like his wife, who knew intimate details of their life together, who even had the same scars and birthmarks. She wasn't Lynette Mueller. Santos heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly stuffed everything back where he'd found it. By the time the bedroom door opened, he was sitting on the bed, pretending to check work emails on his laptop. Movie's over, she said, beginning to get ready for bed. God, I'm exhausted. That flight took more out of me than I thought. Santos watched her carefully. Anything unusual about the flight? Delays? Turbulence? Just normal flying stuff, she replied, pulling on her pajamas, the same blue cotton set Lynette always wore. You know how much I hate flying. I spent most of it with my eyes closed. Another lie. Lynette was a nervous flyer, but she always dealt with anxiety by reading. She'd finished 3 novels on their flight to San Francisco, showing Santos the covers excitedly. A woman who spent the flight with her eyes closed wouldn't know about the normal flying stuff. As she brushed her teeth, Santos's mind raced through possibilities. The most rational explanation was that this was some kind of elaborate intelligence operation. Someone had kidnapped or killed his wife and replaced her with a near-perfect double. Someone who'd been briefed on Lynette's mannerisms, their relationship, their home. But why? Santos worked financial crimes, not national security. He wasn't involved in anything that would warrant this level of operation. Unless he'd stumbled onto something bigger than he realized in one of his cases. Something worth killing for. His phone buzzed again tomorrow night. Cherry Creek State Park. Parking area C. Come alone. Answers await. Santos deleted the message and slipped into bed beside the woman who looked exactly like his wife. She curled up against him just like Lynette always did, her breathing settling into the familiar rhythm of sleep. But Santos lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, planning. Someone had taken his wife and sent him a replacement. They'd made one crucial mistake, though. They'd told him about it. The phone call from Jonathan Pearson was meant to plant seeds of doubt, to make him question reality. But why warn him at all? As dawn broke over Denver, Santos came to a chilling realization. This wasn't just about replacing Lynette. This was about manipulating him, controlling him. Someone needed Santos Mueller, federal investigator, to do something or stop doing something. And they were using the most precious thing in his world as leverage. Whatever they wanted, whoever they were, they'd picked the wrong man to manipulate. Santos Mueller had clawed his way up from nothing, survived a childhood of abandonment and poverty, built a career on bringing down people who thought they were untouchable. Now someone had declared war on him, using the oldest and cruelest weapon possible, taking away the person he loved most. But they'd made a critical error in judgment. They thought that by taking Lynette, they'd broken him. Instead, they just unleashed him. Chapter 3. The Hunter's Moon. Santos had always been methodical in his investigations, but the 24 hours following his discovery of the Rebecca made documents transformed him into something closer to a predator. He went through the motions of normal life, kissing the imposter goodbye before work, making small talk about dinner plans, while systematically hunting for the truth. At the federal building in downtown Denver, Santos uses access to dig deeper into Flight 447. What he found painted a picture so sinister it took his breath away. The flight hadn't crashed or been hijacked in any conventional sense. It had been intercepted by what appeared to be a private military operation, diverted to Blackwater Regional Airport, a facility owned by Dwayne Davidson, a defense contractor Santos had investigated 2 years earlier. Davidson. The name hit Santos like a physical blow. He'd built an airtight case against Davidson's company for fraudulent billing on military contracts, but the prosecution had collapsed when key witnesses suddenly recanted their testimony. Santos had always suspected intimidation, but could never prove it. Now Davidson owned the airfield where his wife's plane had been diverted. Santos pulled Davidson's file, refreshing his memory. Dwayne Davidson, 54, former Special Forces turned defense contractor. His company, Apex Security Solutions, provided private military services to governments and corporations worldwide. On paper, Davidson was worth about $50 million. In reality, Santos suspected his wealth and influence ran much deeper. The man was connected to politicians, intelligence agencies, and foreign governments. He was exactly the kind of person who could orchestrate the kidnapping of federal agents' wives and replace them with trained operatives. But why target Santos? The Davidson investigation was closed, the case dead. Unless Santos spent his lunch break in the archives, pulling every file related to the Davidson case. Buried in witness statements and financial records, he found what he was looking for: a pattern of payments from Davidson's accounts to a series of shell companies. The amounts were small, spread over months, designed to avoid triggering banking regulations. Santos had flagged these transactions in his original investigation, but hadn't been able to trace where the money went. Now, with fresh eyes and new desperation, he began connecting dots. The shell companies led to other companies, which led to real estate purchases, which led to— "Fuck," Santos breathed, staring at his computer screen. The money trail ended at a network of facilities across the western United States: training facilities, safe houses, and what looked like private detention centers. Davidson hadn't just been stealing from the military. He'd been building his own shadow intelligence operation. And now Santos knew too much. His phone rang. Mueller. "Santos, it's Edwin Piper." His supervisor's voice was tight. "I need to see you in my office. Now." Santos's blood chilled. Edwin Piper had been his mentor for 15 years, the man who'd sponsored Santos's rise through the federal ranks. If Piper was involved in this— "On my way," Santos said. Piper's office overlooked the Denver Federal Center, its walls lined with commendations and photos from 3 decades of law enforcement. When Santos entered, he found Piper standing by the window, his usually jovial demeanor replaced by something much darker. "Close the door, Santos." Santos complied, his hand instinctively checking his weapon. "I'm going to ask you a question," Piper said without turning around, "and I need you to think very carefully before you answer. Have you been conducting unauthorized research into the Davidson case?" The question confirmed Santos's worst fears. Either Piper was working with Davidson, or Davidson had people monitoring federal databases. Either way, Santos was blown. "Ed, I think my wife might be in danger." "Someone's been." "Your wife is fine, Santos." Piper turned around, and Santos saw something in his mentor's eyes he'd never seen before: fear. "She's at home, making dinner, completely safe. But that safety depends on you following orders." Santos felt the world shift beneath his feet. "You son of a bitch. You're working with him." "I'm trying to keep you alive," Piper snapped. "Davidson isn't just some defense contractor, Santos. He's connected to intelligence operations that go way above both our pay grades. You stumbled onto something in that investigation that you weren't supposed to see. So you let him walk?" "I let him walk so that dedicated federal agents like you could keep doing their jobs without disappearing into unmarked graves in the desert." Piper moved to his desk, pulling out a thick file. "Davidson offered you a choice. Stop digging, forget what you found, and your wife stays safe. Keep investigating and what? You'll kill her. They already have killed her, Santos." The words hit like a sledgehammer. "The woman in your house isn't Lynette. Lynette died when Flight 447 was intercepted. That woman is Rebecca May, a Canadian intelligence operative trained to be your wife. She's there to monitor you, to make sure you don't become a problem." Santos's vision blurred with rage. "Where is she? Where's Lynette's body?" "I don't know. And if you're smart, you'll stop asking. Take early retirement. Move away. Start over with your new wife. She's been programmed to love you just as much as Lynette did. Live your life, Santos. It's the only way you get to keep living it." Santos stared at his mentor, the man who'd taught him everything about federal investigation, about justice, about never backing down from the truth. "You're a coward, Ed. I'm a survivor, and I'm trying to help you survive too." Santos turned and walked toward the door, then stopped. "The meeting tonight at Cherry Creek State Park. That's your doing?" Piper nodded reluctantly. "Davidson wants to meet you face to face, to make his offer directly. Then tell Davidson I'll be there. But tell him something else too." Santos looked back at his mentor with cold fury. "Tell him Santos Mueller doesn't negotiate with terrorists. And tell him that killing my wife was the biggest mistake he ever made." Santos left the federal building knowing he couldn't go back. By accessing the Davidson files, by pushing too hard, he'd signed his own death warrant. But he'd also learned something crucial. Davidson was afraid of him. Afraid enough to kill Lynette. Afraid enough to replace her with an operative. Afraid enough to want a face-to-face meeting. That fear was Santos's only weapon, and he intended to use it. As he drove toward Cherry Creek State Park that evening, Santos thought about Lynette, not the woman making dinner in his kitchen, but his real wife. The woman who'd held him when his mother died. The woman who'd celebrated with him when he made federal agent. The woman who'd never asked him to be anything other than himself. They'd taken her from him, but they'd also given him a purpose that burned brighter than any case he'd ever worked. Dwayne Davidson thought he could control Santos Mueller through fear and manipulation. Tonight, Davidson was about to learn that some men became more dangerous, not less, when they had nothing left to lose. Chapter 4. The Devil's Bargain. Cherry Creek State Park after dark was a maze of shadows and whispered promises. Santos arrived at parking area C an hour early, using the time to survey the terrain with the tactical mindset he'd learned from his federal training. The location was well chosen, remote enough for privacy, but public enough that a disappearance would raise questions. Davidson's people were professionals. Santos spotted at least 3 surveillance positions around the parking area, 2 escape routes that had been secured, and what looked like signal jammers to prevent any electronic recording. They prepared for this meeting like a military operation. At exactly 9 p.m., a black SUV with tinted windows pulled into the lot. Santos remained in his own vehicle, watching as 4 men emerged. 3 were clearly security, military bearing, concealed weapons, coordinated movement. The 4th was Dwayne Davidson himself. Santos had studied Davidson's file extensively, but seeing him in person was different. The man radiated the kind of confidence that came from never having to face real consequences. He was tall, silver-haired, expensively dressed despite the outdoor setting. But his eyes held the cold calculation of someone who'd long ago stopped seeing other people as human beings. Davidson walked alone towards Santos's car, leaving his security team positioned around the perimeter. The message was clear: I'm not afraid of you, but I'm not stupid either. Santos rolled down his window as Davidson approached. Mr. Mueller, thank you for coming. Cut the bullshit, Davidson. Where's my wife's body? Davidson smiled, an expression devoid of warmth. Your wife died quickly, Mr. Mueller. She never knew what was happening. That's more mercy than he usually show federal investigators who threaten my operations. The casual admission of murder hit Santos like a physical blow, but he kept his expression neutral. What do you want? I want you to understand your situation, and I want to offer you a way forward that keeps everyone alive who's still breathing. Davidson gestured toward the park's picnic area. Walk with me. Your recording devices won't work anyway. We're jamming everything electronic within a half-mile radius. Santos got out of his car, noting the positions of Davidson's security team. 3 men with professional military training, armed, coordinated. Not impossible odds, but close to it. They walked toward a picnic table overlooking the reservoir. The Denver city lights twinkled in the distance like fallen stars. Beautiful view, Davidson said conversationally. Do you know what I see when I look at those lights? I see 800,000 people going about their lives, completely unaware that their safety depends on men like me. Men willing to do what others won't. Men willing to murder innocent people. Your wife wasn't innocent, Mr. Mueller. The moment she married a federal investigator, she became a potential weapon against me. When you started digging into my operations again, she became an active threat. Santos's hands clenched into fists. I wasn't investigating you. The case was closed. But you were planning to reopen it, weren't you? My sources in the federal system indicated you'd been requesting resources for a new investigation. Something about following money trails you'd missed the first time. Santos went cold. He had been planning exactly that. Not actively investigating, just thinking about how he might approach the case differently if given another chance. But those thoughts had been private, shared with no one. How could you possibly know that? Davidson smiled again. Rebecca May is a very talented operative, Mr. Mueller. She's been reporting on your conversations, your plans, your dreams, your fears. Did you really think we'd place someone in your home without ensuring she could do her job? The violation was complete. Not only had they killed Lynette and replaced her with an imposter, but they'd been using that imposter to monitor his most private thoughts and feelings. Here's what's going to happen, Davidson continued. You're going to go home to your wife. You're going to put in for early retirement, medical reasons, stress, whatever. You're going to move somewhere far away from Denver and start a new life. Rebecca will go with you, play the devoted wife, give you children if you want them. She's been programmed to love you genuinely, Mr. Mueller. It won't be an act. And if I refuse, then Rebecca will have a tragic accident. Car crash, perhaps, or a home invasion gone wrong. And then we'll replace her with someone else. And if that person has an accident, we'll find another replacement. We have an extensive roster of operatives, Mr. Mueller. The question is, how many women are you willing to watch die before you accept that resistance is futile? Santos studied Davidson's face in the moonlight. The man wasn't bluffing. He had the resources, the connections, and the complete moral bankruptcy to carry out his threats indefinitely. Why not just kill me? Because you're useful to me alive. A federal investigator who knows to stay away from my operations is an asset. Someone who might warn other agents away from cases they shouldn't pursue. You could have a very comfortable retirement, Mr. Mueller, and a very happy marriage to a woman designed to be perfect for you. Davidson pulled out a satellite phone and showed Santos a photo. It was Lynette's body, recognizable despite the obvious signs of violence. This is what defiance costs. This is what your real wife paid for your stubborn sense of justice. The image seared into Santos's memory, but also crystallized his resolve. Looking at what they'd done to Lynette, Santos made a choice that would have surprised his enemies. He decided to lie. Okay, he said quietly. You win. I'll put in for early retirement next week. Davidson studied him carefully. Just like that. Just like that. You made your point. I don't want Rebecca to end up like Lynette. I'll play along. For the first time, Davidson looked genuinely pleased. I knew you were a smart man, Mr. Mueller. Most people take much longer to see reason. I'm not most people. No, you're not. That's why this arrangement will work so well. Davidson pocketed the satellite phone. Rebecca will be monitoring your compliance, of course. Any signs of continued investigation, any contacts with other federal agents about this matter, any attempts to go public with what you've learned, and she'll report it immediately. Understood. Good. Then we have an agreement. They shook hands, Davidson's grip firm and confident, Santos's conveying the resignation of a beaten man. But inside, Santos was already planning. Davidson had made several critical errors in his moment of triumph. First, he confirmed that Rebecca May was monitoring and reporting everything. That meant Santos could feed her false information, control what Davidson knew about his activities. Second, Davidson had admitted to maintaining extensive files and operations. A network that large had vulnerabilities, pressure points, ways to be attacked and dismantled. Third, and most important, Davidson had shown Santos the photograph of Lynette's body. In doing so, he'd revealed the location where she'd been killed. Santos recognized the industrial setting in the background. It was one of Davidson's facilities, probably the one outside Colorado Springs. As they walked back toward their vehicles, Santos played his role perfectly. He looked defeated, resigned, broken. He thanked Davidson for his mercy and promised to begin retirement paperwork immediately. Davidson's security team relaxed as their boss shook hands with the apparently neutered federal agent. They saw a man who'd been successfully intimidated, a threat that had been neutralized. They didn't see what Santos Mueller had become in that moment by the reservoir, staring at the photo of his murdered wife. They didn't recognize the cold, calculating fury that now burned in his eyes. They had no idea that they'd just awakened something far more dangerous than a federal investigator. They'd awakened a husband with nothing left to lose and 20 years of training in how to destroy people who thought they were untouchable. As Santos drove home to the woman who wasn't his wife, he began planning Dwayne Davidson's complete destruction. It would be methodical, thorough, and absolutely merciless. The game had changed, and Santos Mueller intended to win. Chapter 5, The Perfect Wife. Santos returned home to find Rebecca May preparing late-night tea, exactly as Lynette used to do when he worked evening cases. She looked up with practiced concern as he entered the kitchen, her performance flawless down to the smallest detail. How'd it go? You were gone longer than usual. Just had to meet with a witness about an old case. Santos lied smoothly, accepting the mug she handed him. Earl Grey with a teaspoon of honey, exactly how he liked it. Nothing important. Over the following weeks, Santos played his role as perfectly as Rebecca played hers. He submitted paperwork for early medical retirement, citing stress and burnout. He made appointments with real estate agents to discuss selling their house. He even began researching small towns where they might relocate, places with good hospitals where a pediatric nurse might find work. All of it was theater performed for an audience of one. But while Rebecca reported his compliance to her handlers, Santos was conducting the most important investigation of his career. He used every skill he'd learned in 20 years of federal service, every contact he'd cultivated, every favor he was owed. The key breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Marcella, his sister. "You seem different," she said during one of their weekly phone calls. "Distant, like you're performing instead of living." Santos was careful with his words, knowing Rebecca was likely listening. "Just thinking about the future. Big changes coming. Well, I have some news that might interest you. Remember that art collector from San Francisco who bought 3 of my paintings? Kyle Christian." Santos nearly dropped the phone. Kyle Christian had been one of the names in Davidson's financial records, a shell identity used to purchase real estate in Nevada. What about him? He called about commissioning a large piece for his private retreat in Colorado, some place called the Apex Center. He wants landscape paintings that match the local terrain exactly. Very specific requirements. The Apex Center. Santos had found references to it in Davidson's files, but couldn't locate it. Now he had a way in. "That's wonderful, Marcella. Sounds like a major commission." "It is, but Santos, something feels off about this guy. He knew too much about me, about our family. Asked weird questions about you during our conversations." Santos felt ice in his veins. Davidson was using Marcella to monitor him, just as he was using Rebecca. His sister was being drawn into this web of surveillance and danger. "I think you should pass on that commission," Santos said carefully. "Why? The money is excellent, and just trust me on this one." That night, after Rebecca had fallen asleep, Santos made a decision that would have horrified Davidson if he'd known about it. Santos had been thinking like a federal investigator, trying to build a case against Davidson through evidence and procedure. But Davidson existed beyond the reach of normal justice. He had politicians in his pocket, federal agents on his payroll, and enough resources to make problems disappear permanently. So Santos decided to stop thinking like a federal investigator and start thinking like Davidson himself. Ruthlessly, without regard for rules or consequences, focused solely on results. His first move was to establish a secure communications channel. Santos drove to an electronics store in a part of Denver he never normally visited, paying cash for a prepaid phone and laptop. He used public Wi-Fi from a coffee shop to reach out to contacts Davidson couldn't monitor. Former military personnel who'd worked private security, freelance investigators who operated in gray legal areas, and one particular individual Santos had arrested 5 years earlier, but who owed him a favor. Willie Herman had been a mid-level intelligence operative who'd gotten caught selling classified information to foreign bidders. Santos's investigation had revealed that Herman was actually a double agent, feeding false information to America's enemies while gathering intelligence on their operations. Instead of prosecuting Herman, Santos had quietly recommended him for witness protection and a clean slate. Now Santos needed Herman's particular set of skills. They met at a truck stop outside Colorado Springs, both men taking extensive precautions to avoid surveillance. Herman looked older, weathered by 5 years of living under an assumed identity, but his eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had made him valuable to 3 different intelligence agencies. "Santos Mueller," Herman said with a wry smile. "Well, I got your message. I figured you were either in deep trouble or planning something incredibly stupid. Both, probably." Santos laid out the situation, holding nothing back. Herman listened without interruption, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. "Dwayne Davidson," Herman said finally. "Yeah, I know that name. He's been recruiting ex-intelligence operatives for years, building some kind of private network. Word in certain circles is that he's got clients in foreign governments, multinational corporations, even some three-letter agencies that want deniable assets. Can his operation be infiltrated? Maybe, but not through conventional means. Davidson's paranoid as hell, runs everything through cutouts and compartmentalized cells. Even his own people don't know the full scope of what he's doing. Herman studied Santos carefully. What exactly are you planning here? I'm going to destroy him. Completely. I'm going to dismantle his organization, expose his operations, and make sure he pays for what he did to Lynette and the woman in your house. Santos felt something cold settle in his chest. Rebecca May is an enemy operative who's been violating my privacy and reporting on my activities for weeks. When this is over, she'll face the consequences of her choices. Herman nodded slowly. All right, but if we're going to do this, we do it right. No half measures, no federal procedure, no rules of evidence. We do whatever it takes to win, and we don't look back. Agreed. Then let's start with what you know about Davidson's facilities. Because if we're going to bring down his operation, we need to hit him where it hurts most. Over the next 3 hours, Santos and Herman planned what amounted to a private war against Dwayne Davidson. They identified targets, secured resources, and established protocols that would make Santos's actions completely deniable. By the time they parted ways, Santos had transformed from a federal investigator seeking justice into something far more dangerous. A man with the skills to wage asymmetric warfare and nothing left to lose. As Santos drove home that night, he thought about the woman waiting in his bed. Rebecca May had probably been briefed on his psychological profile, told that he was a by-the-books federal agent who would eventually accept his situation and adapt to it. She'd been trained to be the perfect replacement for Lynette, programmed to make him love her. But Rebecca and her handlers had made a crucial miscalculation. They'd assumed that taking Lynette away would break Santos's will to fight. Instead, it had removed the last moral constraints that had kept him operating within the bounds of law and procedure. Santos Mueller, the federal investigator, would have tried to build a case against Davidson and bring him to justice through the courts. Santos Mueller, the widower, had different plans entirely. As he slipped quietly into bed beside Rebecca, Santos smiled in the darkness. Let her report his compliance to Davidson. Let them think they'd won. The deeper their complacency, the more devastating their fall would be. The war was about to begin, and Santos held all the advantages: superior knowledge of his enemy, access to resources Davidson couldn't monitor, and the absolute certainty that comes from having nothing left to lose. Davidson had made one final, fatal error. By showing Santos that photograph of Lynette's body, he'd proven that this wasn't about national security or legitimate intelligence operations. This was about a sociopathic criminal who killed innocent people to protect his power and wealth. And Santos Mueller had spent 20 years of his life learning exactly how to destroy people like that. Chapter 6. The Network Unravels. 3 weeks into his campaign against Davidson, Santos had learned to live 2 lives simultaneously. By day, he played the role of a defeated federal agent preparing for retirement. He showed Rebecca house listings in quiet mountain towns, discussed plans for a simpler life, even bought her flowers, and took her to dinner like a devoted husband adapting to their new reality. By night, he waged a sophisticated intelligence war that would have impressed his former colleagues at the Treasury Department. The first phase had been reconnaissance. Using Willie Herman's contacts and his own investigative skills, Santos had mapped Davidson's network with surgical precision. The Apex Center wasn't just a private retreat. It was the hub of Davidson's intelligence operation, housing training facilities, communication centers, and what appeared to be holding cells for uncooperative targets. The second phase was disruption. Santos began with financial warfare, the specialty he'd honed in 20 years of federal service. Using techniques that existed in legal gray areas, he systematically attacked Davidson's funding streams. Shell companies found their accounts frozen due to suspicious activity reports. Government contracts faced sudden regulatory reviews. International wire transfers were delayed or misdirected through computer glitches. None of these actions could be traced back to Santos, but their cumulative effect was devastating. Davidson's operation was built on careful financial planning and predictable cash flow. Santos turned that strength into a weakness. The third phase was psychological warfare. Mr. Mueller? Rebecca looked up from her laptop one evening, concern creasing her features. I just got the strangest phone call. Someone claiming to be from the Canadian consulate, asking about my immigration status. Santos looked appropriately puzzled. That is strange. Did they say what it was about? They mentioned some discrepancy in my documentation. I told them I was born in Toronto, but they said their records showed no birth certificate for Rebecca May on the date I gave them. Santos had arranged the call, of course, using Herman's contacts to have someone pose as a consular official. The goal wasn't to expose Rebecca immediately. That would alert Davidson and ruin everything. The goal was to make Rebecca question her own cover story, to introduce doubt and stress that would affect her performance. Bureaucratic mix-up, probably, Santos said. You know how government systems can be. But he could see the seed of doubt in Rebecca's eyes. Professional operatives were trained to maintain cover under pressure, but they were also trained to recognize when that cover might be compromised. Rebecca was beginning to wonder if someone was investigating her background. That doubt would make her more cautious, more likely to second-guess her reports to Davidson. It would also make her handlers more suspicious of the intelligence she provided, reducing their confidence in their surveillance of Santos. The fourth phase was direct action. Santos had identified 17 facilities connected to Davidson's network across 4 western states. Most were lightly defended, used primarily for training and administrative functions. But 3 sites appeared to be high-value targets: the Apex Center in Colorado, a communications facility in Utah, and what looked like a detention center in Nevada. The Nevada facility was where Santos believed they'd taken Lynette before killing her. Working with Herman and a carefully selected team of former military contractors, Santos began systematic raids on Davidson's secondary facilities. They used techniques borrowed from Special Forces operations: fast insertion, data extraction, facility destruction, clean withdrawal. The first facility they hit was a training camp disguised as a corporate retreat center outside Moab, Utah. Santos and his team breached the perimeter at 2 a.m., neutralized security systems, and extracted hard drives and documents before setting fire to the buildings. The whole operation took 23 minutes. The intelligence they gathered was gold: training manuals for surveillance operatives, psychological profiles of federal agents targeted for monitoring, and most importantly, a roster of current operations. Santos's hands shook as he read through the files. Davidson had been conducting illegal surveillance on hundreds of federal agents, judges, prosecutors, and politicians. The scope of the operation was staggering: a private intelligence network that treated the United States government as a hostile entity to be monitored and controlled. But what made Santos's blood run cold was finding Lynette's file. It contained detailed psychological assessments, surveillance photos taken without her knowledge, and plans for her termination that dated back 6 months before Flight 447. They hadn't killed Lynette as a response to Santos's investigation. They'd been planning to kill her from the beginning, as part of a long-term operation to control him. The revelation transformed Santos's careful anger into something much more dangerous: pure rage focused with surgical precision. The second facility they hit was a communications center in rural Wyoming. This time, Santos didn't just extract intelligence. He turned the facility against Davidson's own network. Herman planted sophisticated malware that would give them access to Davidson's communications while remaining undetectable. Now Santos could read Davidson's messages in real time, tracking his responses to the attacks, his attempt to identify the source of his problems, his growing paranoia as his carefully controlled operation began falling apart. What Santos learned was that Davidson was indeed reporting to higher authorities, not just government agencies, but international clients who paid enormous sums for intelligence on American political and business leaders. Davidson wasn't just a rogue contractor. He was essentially a private spy service selling American secrets to the highest bidder. The third facility was personal. The detention center in Nevada was built like a black site prison, hidden in desert terrain with no official existence. Santos and his team surveilled it for 3 days before moving, mapping patrol routes, identifying weaknesses, planning an operation that would be both strategically valuable and personally satisfying. The raid began at dawn. Santos led the assault personally, using breaching charges and flashbang grenades to overwhelm the defenders. The facility held 12 prisoners, federal agents, prosecutors, and journalists who'd apparently gotten too close to Davidson's operations. But Santos's primary objective was the basement level, where Herman's intelligence suggested Davidson kept records of terminated targets. What Santos found in that basement changed everything. Lynette wasn't Davidson's first victim. The files documented dozens of murders going back years, federal agents who'd died in accidents, prosecutors who'd succumbed to heart attacks, journalists who'd perished in muggings gone wrong. Davidson had been assassinating American officials for years, eliminating anyone who threatened his operation or his client's interests. And there, in a refrigerated storage unit, Santos found what remained of his wife. The drive back to Denver was the longest of Santos's life. Lynette's body was finally coming home, but her murderer was still free, still operating, still killing innocent people to protect his criminal empire. Rebecca was waiting when Santos returned home, her expression concerned. "You were gone all day. I tried calling, but your phone went straight to voicemail." "Just had to drive up to Cheyenne for some retirement paperwork," Santos lied, smoothly. Boring government stuff. But Rebecca was studying him more carefully now, her training making her sensitive to changes in his behavior. She could sense something different about him, some fundamental shift that her psychological profile of Santos Mueller hadn't predicted. "Santos, are you feeling all right? You seem different lately." Santos looked at the woman who'd been living in his home for weeks, monitoring his every word and action, reporting his most private moments to the man who'd murdered his wife. Rebecca May, who'd been programmed to love him, who'd been trained to replace Lynette so perfectly that he might never notice the difference. "I feel fine," Santos said, walking past her toward his study. "Better than I have in months, actually." And it was true. For the first time since this nightmare began, Santos had a clear picture of his enemy and a concrete plan for victory. Davidson's network was crumbling under sustained attack. His finances were in chaos. His operations were compromised. But most importantly, Santos now had everything he needed to spring the trap he'd been preparing for weeks. Tomorrow night, Dwayne Davidson would learn what happened to men who declared war on Santos Mueller. The hunter was about to become the hunted. Chapter 7, The Devil's Due. The text message arrived at 6 p.m., exactly as Santos had planned. Location compromised. Emergency extraction required. Cherry Creek Park, midnight. Come alone. Rebecca showed him the message, her face a mask of professional concern. "What do you think this means?" Santos studied the phone, playing his role perfectly. "I have no idea. Maybe someone's threatening one of your old cases." It was a masterful performance of confused innocence. Rebecca would report the message to her handlers, who would assume it was legitimate communication from one of their other operations. They'd never suspect that Santos had sent it himself, using communication protocols he'd extracted from Davidson's compromised facilities. "Should we call the police?" Rebecca asked. "Let me think about it. Maybe I should go meet with whoever sent this, find out what's happening. That could be dangerous." Santos appreciated the irony. Rebecca May, the woman sent to monitor and manipulate him, was now expressing genuine concern for his safety. Her psychological conditioning was so complete that she probably believed her own feelings. "I'll be careful," Santos promised. "Besides, what else can I do? If someone's in trouble and they reached out to me, I can't just ignore it." Rebecca nodded reluctantly, as Santos had known she would. Her profile of his character emphasized his sense of duty and his inability to abandon people who needed help. She would report this to Davidson as expected behavior. What she wouldn't report was Santos's true destination. At 11 p.m., Santos kissed Rebecca goodbye and drove toward Cherry Creek State Park. But instead of going to the meeting location, he took a circuitous route to his real objective, the Apex Center Davidson's primary facility hidden in the foothills outside Colorado Springs. Willie Herman and his team were already in position, having spent 3 days infiltrating the facility's security systems. The plan they developed was elegant in its simplicity. While Davidson's people were preparing for a fake emergency meeting at Cherry Creek, Santos would penetrate their headquarters and extract the intelligence that would destroy their entire organization. But Santos had a secondary objective that Herman didn't know about. Hidden in the Apex Center's files was evidence that could bring down not just Davidson, but the entire network of corrupt officials who'd enabled his operation. Politicians, intelligence officers, federal prosecutors, everyone who turned a blind eye to Davidson's crimes in exchange for money or favors. Santos wanted them all. The Apex Center was built into a natural depression in the foothills, camouflaged to look like a corporate retreat from aerial surveillance. But Herman's reconnaissance had revealed the truth. It was a fortress, complete with underground bunkers, sophisticated security systems, and enough firepower to repel a small army. Santos infiltrated the facility through a service tunnel Herman had identified, emerging into a basement level that housed the center's communication and data processing systems. The building's layout matched the intelligence they'd gathered from capture documents, 12 levels above ground, 5 levels below, with Davidson's personal offices and the most sensitive files located on the top floor. The war was no longer covert. Santos drove home through empty Denver streets, his phone buzzing with encrypted messages from Willie Herman. The coordinated strikes on Davidson's remaining facilities had been devastating. For more installations destroyed, 3 captured, and dozens of operatives either killed or taken prisoner. Davidson's network was crumbling in real time. But Santos's most valuable prize wasn't the physical damage. It was the intelligence he'd extracted from Davidson's computers before destroying the Apex Center. The files contain enough evidence to bring down not just Davidson, but 37 federal officials who'd been collaborating with his operation, including Edwin Piper. When Santos arrived home, he found Rebecca waiting in the living room, still fully dressed despite the late hour. Her expression was carefully neutral, but Santos could see the tension in her posture. "How did your meeting go?" she asked. "Strange. Nobody showed up. I waited for an hour, then came home." Santos moved toward the kitchen, playing the role of confused innocence. Maybe it was a prank or something. Rebecca nodded, but Santos caught her glancing toward her phone. She was probably receiving updates about the destruction of Davidson's facilities, trying to reconcile Santos's apparent ignorance with the catastrophic damage being done to her organization. "I'm exhausted," Santos said, kissing her forehead. "Let's go to bed." In their bedroom, Rebecca went through her normal routine, changing into pajamas, brushing her teeth, setting her phone on the nightstand. But Santos noticed she was taking longer than usual, probably receiving detailed instructions from her handlers about how to proceed. Santos pretended to fall asleep quickly, but he remained alert, listening to Rebecca's breathing, monitoring her movements. Around 3 a.m., she carefully got out of bed and retrieved her phone, probably to send a status report. It was time to end the charade. "Rebecca," Santos said quietly, not turning over or opening his eyes. "Before you send that message, you might want to know that your entire organization just ceased to exist." He felt her freeze beside the bed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The Apex Center burned to the ground 3 hours ago, along with your training facilities in Utah, Wyoming, Nevada, and California. Your communication networks have been compromised. Your financial assets have been frozen. And most importantly, every federal official who was collaborating with Davidson is about to be arrested on charges of treason." Santos rolled over and looked at her in the dim light from the street. Rebecca's professional mask had finally slipped, revealing the trapped animal underneath. "Your real name is Rebecca May," Santos continued conversationally. "You're a Canadian intelligence operative who was recruited by Davidson's organization 18 months ago. You've been living as my wife for 6 weeks, monitoring my activities and reporting to Dwayne Davidson. You participated in the murder of Lynette Mueller, an innocent woman whose only crime was marrying a federal investigator." Rebecca's hand moved toward the nightstand, where Santos knew she kept a concealed weapon. But Santos was faster, his own pistol appearing in his hand with practiced ease. "I wouldn't," he advised. "You're already in enough trouble." Rebecca sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, her hands visible. "What do you want?" "I want you to make a choice. You can face trial for espionage, conspiracy to commit murder, and about 30 other federal charges that will put you away for life. Or you can cooperate with federal prosecutors and testify against Davidson and everyone who worked with him. And if I cooperate, witness protection, new identity, a chance to start over somewhere far away from this mess." Rebecca studied Santos's face in the darkness. "Why are you offering me this?" "I helped kill your wife." The question hit Santos like a physical blow, but he'd been preparing for this moment for weeks. "Because you were following orders from people who manipulated you. Because Lynette would have wanted me to show mercy when I could. And because I need your testimony to make sure everyone responsible for this pays the price." It was true, but not the whole truth. The whole truth was that Santos had spent 6 weeks watching Rebecca play the role of perfect wife, and despite knowing what she was, he'd been impressed by her intelligence, her dedication, even her genuine moments of seeming to care about him. She was a victim of Davidson's manipulation too, programmed to believe in a mission that was actually a criminal enterprise. "Davidson will kill me if I testify," Rebecca said. "Davidson will be dead or in federal prison within 48 hours, Santos replied. "I have enough evidence to destroy him and everyone who worked with him. The only question is whether you want to go down with him or help me make sure justice is served." Rebecca was quiet for several minutes, processing her options. Finally, she looked up at Santos with something like respect in her eyes. "You played us all, didn't you? From the very beginning. From the moment I received that phone call about Flight 447. I knew something was wrong, so I started investigating. What I found was bigger than I imagined. A criminal conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of federal law enforcement. And you destroyed it all." "Not yet, but I will." Rebecca stood up slowly, her hands still visible. "If I cooperate, if I testify against Davidson and the others, will you tell the prosecutors that I try to protect you at the end? That I wasn't completely evil?" Santos studied her face, looking for deception, but finding only resignation and perhaps a glimmer of hope. "If you tell the truth about everything, about Davidson's operations, about the other federal agents being monitored, about who gave the orders to kill Lynette, then yes. I'll make sure they know you chose to do the right thing when it mattered. Then I'll cooperate." Santos nodded and picked up his phone. "Willie Herman? It's time. Have your FBI contacts meet us at the Denver Federal Building in 1 hour. And tell them to bring arrest warrants for everyone on the list I sent you." As Santos got dressed, he thought about Lynette and what she would have said about his campaign against Davidson. She'd always believed in justice tempered with mercy, in fighting evil without becoming evil yourself. She would have approved of offering Rebecca a chance at redemption. But she also would have insisted that everyone responsible for her death face the full consequences of their actions. As dawn broke over Denver, Santos Mueller prepared to walk into the federal building one last time. Not as a defeated investigator seeking early retirement, but as the man who'd single-handedly exposed and destroyed the largest domestic espionage operation in American history. Dwayne Davidson's empire was about to fall, and Santos intended to be there when it happened. Justice for Lynette was finally at hand. Moving through the facility required every stealth skill Santos had learned in 20 years of federal service. Davidson's security team was military-trained and heavily armed, but they were expecting threats from outside the facility, not from someone who'd already penetrated their perimeter. Santos made his way upward through maintenance corridors and service elevators, avoiding patrol routes Herman had mapped during their surveillance. The plan called for him to reach Davidson's office, extract financial records and client lists, and escape before anyone realized the facility had been breached. But when Santos reached the 10th floor, he found something that changed everything. The level had been converted into a private apartment, complete with luxury furnishings, a full kitchen, and what appeared to be living quarters for a permanent resident. But it wasn't Davidson's apartment. The personal belongings suggested someone else lived here. Santos found his answer in a photograph on the bedside table. Edwin Piper, his former supervisor, shaking hands with Davidson at what looked like a government function. Piper wasn't just working with Davidson. He was living at the Apex Center, serving as Davidson's primary liaison with federal law enforcement. Santos's mentor, the man who'd guided his career for 15 years, was the inside source who'd made Davidson's operation possible. The betrayal was complete and devastating. Piper had recommended Santos for cases that would benefit Davidson's clients. He'd steered investigations away from Davidson's operations. He'd probably even suggested Santos as a target for surveillance and manipulation. Santos found Piper's files in a secure cabinet beside his bed. The documents revealed years of collaboration with Davidson, including detailed plans for monitoring and controlling federal agents across multiple agencies. Santos wasn't Davidson's only target. He was just one of dozens of federal officials being manipulated through threats, blackmail, and replacement of family members. But the most damning document was a communication log showing that Piper had been reporting Santos's activities to Davidson from the very beginning of their relationship. Every case Santos had worked, every success he'd achieved, every trust he'd placed in his mentor, all of it had been monitored and reported to a criminal who was selling American secrets to foreign governments. Santos photographed everything with his phone, his hands shaking with rage. Piper's betrayal was worse than Davidson's crimes because it was personal. Davidson was a sociopathic criminal who'd chosen evil for profit. Piper was a man Santos had trusted, admired, and loved like a father. The sound of approaching footsteps snapped Santos back to operational reality. He quickly secured the files and moved toward the emergency exit, but the footsteps were coming from that direction. Santos was trapped on the 10th floor with nowhere to go but up. He made his way to the stairwell and climbed toward Davidson's office on the 12th floor. If he was going to be discovered, he might as well complete his mission first. Davidson's office was a monument to ego and paranoia. The walls were covered with photographs of Davidson meeting with politicians, military officers, and foreign dignitaries. A gun safe stood open, revealing enough firepower to equip a small military unit. And dominating the room was a massive desk covered with documents related to operations across 3 continents. Santos began photographing everything, his phone's camera capturing page after page of incriminating evidence. Client lists, operational plans, financial records, assassination orders. It was all there, enough evidence to destroy Davidson's network and expose every official who'd enabled his crimes. Then Santos found a file that made him stop breathing. It was labeled Operation Nightshade, and it detailed Davidson's plan to systematically eliminate federal agents who posed threats to his operations. The list included prosecutors, investigators, and judges from across the country. Santos's name was third on the list, with a note indicating that his termination should appear to be a murder-suicide involving his wife. They'd planned to kill both Santos and Lynette, then claimed Santos had snapped under job stress and killed his wife before turning the gun on himself. It would have been the perfect cover for eliminating a troublesome federal agent while sending a message to others who might consider investigating Davidson's operations. The only reason Santos was still alive was that Davidson had decided his intelligence value was greater than the threat he posed. But that calculation could change at any moment. Santos pocketed the Operation Nightshade file and prepared to leave, but the sound of elevator doors opening on the floor below told him it was too late. Davidson's security team had discovered the breach and was conducting a systematic search of the building. Santos had minutes, maybe less, before they reached the 12th floor. He moved to Davidson's computer and inserted a USB drive Herman had prepared, uploading malware that would give them remote access to Davidson's entire network. While the virus installed, Santos used Davidson's satellite phone to send a pre-written message to Willie Herman, package secure. Initiate final phase. The message would trigger Herman's team to begin the coordinated assault on Davidson's remaining facilities, using the intelligence Santos had gathered to strike at every vulnerable point simultaneously. As footsteps echoed in the stairwell, Santos moved to the office's balcony and looked down at the 12-story drop to the parking lot below. There was no escape route. Davidson's security team had sealed the building. But Santos Mueller had faced impossible odds before, and he'd always found a way to win. He activated the building's fire suppression system using Davidson's computer, triggering alarms that would force the security team to evacuate the lower floors. In the confusion, Santos made his way back down to the basement level, where Herman's prepositioned charges were waiting to be detonated. Santos had 30 seconds to reach the service tunnel before the Apex Center became a very expensive pile of rubble. As he crawled through the tunnel towards safety, Santos could hear the building collapsing behind him. Davidson's fortress, his headquarters, his monument to criminal achievement, all of it was turning to dust and debris. But more importantly, Santos had what he'd come for, evidence that would expose not just Davidson's crimes, but the entire network of corruption that had made them possible. The war was entering its final phase, and Santos Mueller held all the advantages. Davidson's empire was about to fall, and everyone who'd enabled his crimes would fall with him. The hunter had become the hunted, and now it was time for the reckoning. Chapter 8, Checkmate. The explosion at the Apex Center lit up the Colorado sky like a second sunrise, visible from 20 miles away. By the time fire departments arrived, Davidson's fortress was nothing but burning rubble and twisted metal. Local news reported it as a gas leak explosion, but Santos knew that by morning, Davidson would understand exactly what had happened. Chapter 9, Justice Served. The Denver Federal Building had never seen a morning quite like this one. By 7 a.m., the parking garage was filled with unmarked vehicles from agencies across the federal government. FBI, Treasury, Justice Department, and even CIA personnel streamed into the building carrying boxes of evidence and files of arrest warrants. Santos Mueller walked through the chaos with quiet satisfaction. After 6 weeks of playing the role of defeated federal agent, he was finally himself again. The relentless investigator who'd never met a case he couldn't crack or a criminal he couldn't bring down. Edwin Piper was the first arrest. Santos watched through a conference room window as his former mentor was led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. 23 years of federal service, destroyed by greed and corruption. "He keeps asking to speak with you," said Darla Chase, the FBI agent coordinating the arrests. "Claims he can explain everything." "There's nothing to explain," Santos replied. "I found his files at Davidson's facility. He's been selling federal investigations to a criminal organization for at least 5 years. The evidence was overwhelming. Piper's collaboration with Davidson was documented in excruciating detail. Every case he'd compromised, every investigation he'd derailed, every federal agent he'd betrayed. The man Santos had trusted like a father had been working for the enemy from the beginning. The second wave of arrests was even more satisfying. Prosecutors, judges, and federal agents across 4 states were taken into custody as the scope of Davidson's network became clear. Each arrest was based on irrefutable evidence Santos had extracted from the Apex Center's computers before destroying the facility. But the prize remained elusive. Dwayne Davidson had vanished after the destruction of his headquarters, presumably fleeing to one of his international safe houses. Santos had anticipated this. Men like Davidson didn't survive by fighting to the last stand. They survived by having multiple escape routes and enough money to disappear when things went wrong. "We've frozen his domestic assets," Agent Chase reported, "but he probably has accounts in non-extradition countries. He could stay hidden indefinitely." Santos smiled. "No, he can't." "What do you mean?" Santos pulled out a file he'd been saving for this moment. "Davidson made 2 mistakes. First, he assumed I was just a federal investigator who would follow normal procedures. Second, he underestimated how far I'd go to get justice for my wife." The file contained surveillance photos Herman's team had taken during their preparation phase. Images of Davidson's private retreat in the Cayman Islands, complete with architectural plans and security assessments. While you were processing arrests, I've been tracking Davidson's movements through his financial transactions. He's been moving money to his Cayman account for the past week, preparing for his escape. But the Caymans have an extradition treaty with the United States for major crimes like treason and murder. Agent Chase studied the photographs. "You're suggesting we request extradition?" I'm suggesting we don't wait for extradition procedures. Santos opened his phone and showed Chase a message from Willie Herman. Package delivered. Subject secured. Awaiting pickup instructions. You had him kidnapped? I had him arrested by private contractors operating under the authority of the federal warrant you issued this morning. Davidson is currently being held at a secure location, ready for transport back to United States custody. It was a legal gray area that would probably generate controversy later, but Santos didn't care. Davidson had murdered his wife, terrorized innocent people, and corrupted the federal justice system. If capturing him required bending a few rules, so be it. 4 hours later, Dwayne Davidson was led into a Denver holding facility in shackles and an orange jumpsuit. The man who'd once commanded a private intelligence empire, who'd lived in luxury while ordering the deaths of federal agents, looked like what he truly was, a common criminal facing the consequences of his actions. Santos waited in the interrogation room when they brought Davidson in. The two men stared at each other across the metal table, predator and prey with their roles finally reversed. You destroyed everything, Davidson said finally. Decades of work, billions of dollars in assets, hundreds of operatives. For what? Your wife is still dead. My wife is still dead, Santos agreed. But she's been avenged. Your network is destroyed, your collaborators are in prison, and you're going to spend the rest of your life in federal custody. You think this is over? I had clients in 12 countries. Government officials who depended on my intelligence services. They won't just forget about the disruption you've caused. Santos leaned forward. Let them come. I've already exposed your entire client list to the appropriate authorities. Every politician you were blackmailing, every foreign agent you were bribing, every intelligence officer you corrupted, they're all facing their own reckonings now. Davidson's confident facade finally cracked. You don't understand the forces you're dealing with. I understand them perfectly. I've been dealing with criminals like you for 20 years. The only difference is that this time, it was personal. Santos stood to leave, then paused. Oh, and Davidson? Rebecca May has agreed to testify against you in exchange for witness protection. She's going to tell the jury exactly how you order my wife's murder, exactly how you plan to kill me, exactly how you corrupted federal officials to protect your operation. For the first time since Santos had met him, Dwayne Davidson looked genuinely afraid. She won't do it. I have leverage over her psychological conditioning that stopped working the moment she realized you'd been using her. Rebecca May is a lot smarter than you gave her credit for. Smart enough to recognize when she's been manipulated by a sociopathic criminal. Santos left Davidson in the interrogation room and walked out of the federal building into the Colorado sunshine. His phone was buzzing with messages from superiors, colleagues, and reporters who'd gotten wind of the massive federal operation. But Santos ignored them all. He had one more stop to make. The cemetery where Lynette was buried overlooked the Denver skyline, a peaceful place where the noise and chaos of the city seemed distant. Santos knelt beside her headstone and placed a single red rose on the grass. It's over, he said quietly. Davidson's in custody. Everyone who helped him is either dead or in prison. Justice has been served. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, Santos could almost imagine he heard Lynette's voice, telling him she was proud of him, telling him it was time to move forward with his life. Santos stood and walked back to his car, where Willie Herman was waiting. What's next? Herman asked. Next, I testify at about 50 trials and make sure every one of these bastards gets convicted. Then I figure out what to do with the rest of my life. Any ideas? Santos looked back at the cemetery, then at the Denver skyline in the distance. Maybe private security. Maybe consulting with federal agencies on complex investigations. Maybe something completely different. He'd won his war against Davidson, but the victory had cost him everything he'd thought he wanted. His career as a federal agent was over. The methods he'd used to destroy Davidson's network were too controversial for him to continue in government service. His marriage to Lynette was a memory now, their future together stolen by a criminal's greed. But Santos Mueller had learned something about himself during these weeks of planning and fighting. He was capable